I guess. So I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Board of Selectmen, November 13th. November 13th. Dated November 27th, 2012. 29th. Oh. Okay. Let's start again. So we'll call to order the meeting. The first thing on the agenda is the students. We have three from St. Mary's of the Hill School that are representing a walk for Haiti. And would you like to have those students come up and be recognized?
Hello.
How you doing? I want you to all say what your names are.
I'm Talia.
Hi, Talia.
This is Janelle
Hi, Janelle.
and Jacob.
Hi, Jacob. And I know you did this last year, or students did this last year, but why don't you just explain what the walk is for? And
So first of all, before we start, we want to thank you guys so much for granting us permission to do last year's walk. It was
Oh, you're
great
welcome.
success. So the day that we have for this year is April 28th, 2013.
Mhm.
And we would like to renew the permit if we can.
Okay. And basically, the walk is to raise money, and the money goes to Haiti for. Yeah, I mean, Haiti's had earthquakes and everything else over there, so it's much in need of any help it can get. I think it's a great thing that you're doing. So we do have a motion before us. If you,
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve a request from the students of St. Mary's of the Hill School to use the town's streets and ways for a walk to raise funds for Haiti.
Second motion.
motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Congratulations. Okay, next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from November 1st, 15th, and 20th.
Move approval of November 1st, 2012.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve November 1st been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Move approval of November 15th, 2012.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. And November 20th.
Move approval of November 20th, 2012.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Discussion. Item number 11 says that J. Thomas Hurley moved, Robert C. Sweeney seconded, and the board voted unanimously to accept a resignation effective immediately from Committee Chair Richard Kleinman of the Wind Energy Committee. I'm suggesting that we, after the word accept, add the word with regret.
I don't know. Anybody have any objections to that? No?
No,
Okay, it's fine. So we're moving the minutes of November 20th as revised. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Item 4 is confirmation of future meeting dates. We are meeting on December 6th, and I guess December 20th would be the next Thursday that we're meeting on. If that's okay with everybody?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Item 5 on the agenda is citizens speak. Are there any citizens who wish to address the board?
Yes. I'm Phil Johanning. I live at 23 Parkwood Drive in Milton.
Mhm.
I had heard from the town clerk's office that there was an idea that there would be a vote on extending summer hours for the town sometime during the December meetings. And I guess I want to say about that issue that I can understand how it would benefit the town employees, but I don't understand how it benefits me as a town resident. I think there should be perhaps a compromise position, and I think I would like to recommend that what should take place is that Town Hall should be closed completely on Friday, and that those additional hours that will be worked on Friday would be added to Thursday to extend the Town Hall access into the evening. I myself went to Town Hall this afternoon, and I had to take an hour and a half of paid time off to do it. And every time I want to go to Town Hall, that's exactly what I have to do. My hours are 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. That doesn't allow me any time at all to go to Town Hall unless I take vacation from work, which I think is wrong. I think there are plenty of people in my position, and I think access is important. And I think that the selectmen should consider seriously providing access to people who work a normal schedule and extend the hours on Wednesday or Thursday night so that everybody has access to Town Hall without having to take vacation, paid time off, anything like that. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is a public hearing for the classification of property according to use. And we do have the Board of Assessors here with us, so I'd like to invite them up. How you doing, Joe? And
first, let me introduce myself. I'm M. Joseph Manning, Chairman of the Board of Assessors. And the first order of business is to thank you for agreeing to meet with us this evening to establish the tax rate for the fiscal 13. And by law, under Chapter 59, no, I guess I'm wrong, Chapter 40, Section 56, the setting of the tax rate rests in the hands of the Board of Selectmen. So we have, at your request, assembled all the information necessary to establish the rate for this coming year. And I have with us new members who I'd like to introduce, Bill Henderson and Bill Bennett, who have joined the board as of within the last 6 months. And they've been a pleasure to serve with, and hopefully we'll continue to carry out our duties as the future holds. I'd like to ask, I brought with us our chief appraiser, Jeff Danley, who's every year assisted and assembled this data that you have before you. So if there's any questions or anything that you might have, he'll be more than happy to address them. Jeff?
and why don't you just kind of bring us through the process a little bit, Joe, just so that people at home understand it?
Does everyone have a copy of the report?
Yes.
Did anybody in the audience like? Okay, as a part of the tax rate setting process every year, that there are 4 policy decisions needed to be determined. One is the amount of the tax levy which each class will bear: residential, open space, commercial, industrial, personal property. Under the guidelines, a split of the rate may be established, putting a higher percentage of the levy on the commercial property up to 150% of what the residential would be. And there's also item 2 would be allowance of up to a 20% residential exemption, which can be applied to each principal residence, and the exemption is absorbed within the class. Also, a policy decision concerning the amount of tax levy that open space will bear in relation to the residential class. The open space class is very small. It's typically, that class has been deleted because in that we would have land of small, low value and so on. And then the fourth decision is regarding a small commercial exemption, an exemption of any percentage up to 10%, which may be applied to Class 3 parcels. In past history, the Board of Assessors has recommended the maximum adjustment to the commercial levy, thereby giving the residential class the maximum benefit allowed by law. Typically, and then the residential exemption, the board recommends no adjustment there. It's absorbed within the class. We're getting some benefit to the residential through the commercial class. The open space, again, we have very little land there. Well, we've deleted that class, so the recommendation would be not to give a exemption there. And the small commercial exemption, the board is recommending no exemption there. Again, like the residential class, the exemption is absorbed within the class. Buildings of over $1 million are not entitled to it, and it has to have all businesses that might qualify would have to have 10 or less employees as certified by the Department of Employment. There's not enough single-use buildings to absorb any exemption to give the benefit to the small business owners. And most of those anyway are in larger buildings, like you've got the Greenspan building, the Jessen building, you've got smaller businesses. Any increase would, again, be passed down to the businesses that the exemption is designed to help.
And basically, with those exemptions, we would still get the same amount of tax. It would
Correct.
just be distributed differently amongst
Correct, that's correct.
those classes of, so it wouldn't be like we'd be getting less revenue, we'd be just distributing it around differently.
That's correct.
And just so that everybody understands, basically the way we work under Proposition 2.5, we take last year's tax levy limit and we increase it by 2.5%, assuming there's no override. We add to that the tax on new growth, or the levy on new growth.
Correct.
And then we also add to that any debt exclusion revenue that we might have.
Correct.
And that basically gives our total tax levy. And then
What would the debt exclusion be?
the debt exclusion is, for example, the library and the schools right now. That's primarily the two. There were debt overrides in prior years. When the debt goes away, that levy also goes away with it and decreases as the debt decreases. So it gives us about a $65 million approximately total levy.
Approximately $64,987.03.
3 cents.
$3.
And then we're basically taking that and we're dividing it by the assessed value.
Correct.
And we're skewing so that the commercial businesses get 150% more of the rate than the residential rate is.
Correct.
We're collecting the same money, we're just skewing it a little bit heavier to the commercial side. And essentially that's the way it works. So that's giving us a rate of, what was it, 1471, was it?
14, well, I believe it would work out to 1470, again, the
1471.
rounding, and 2255 for the commercial
Correct.
rate. So it's a 35-cent increase residential, and it's 54 cents to the commercial and industrial and personal property.
And the average tax bill would be how much for
On
homeowner?
page, average residential tax bill would be $7,477. Single family.
Is that based on like a 5.8 or a 510,000 number, or?
The new average is set single family home is 508,262. It's slightly down. It's point.
Okay, now that 508, that's our average price of a single-family home
Correct.
in calendar year 2011, right?
It's based on calendar 2011 sales. Correct.
So what's the average house, single-family house selling for in Milton in 2012? Do you know?
Right now, I don't know. I've seen
Okay.
some pretty healthy sales.
I just-
I would say that next year, the values will be going up.
Okay.
Jeff, in commercial property, do you assess based on the occupancy or the
No.
vacancy? No?
Well, we do use an income approach to value, and vacancies are considered, yes.
So if a building is full, you assess it higher? Basically.
Well, in the revaluation that we do every 3 years, we collect income and expense information and develop values based on that. But then if we do have to assign a value, there's a lot of owner-occupied properties, so we have to collect income and expense information from neighboring communities, develop tables and apply those to those buildings that are owner-occupied, and we do have to consider perhaps that maybe some are vacant, yes.
How does the rate compare to similar towns to Milton? Like 1471 is the residential tax rate. What is it in Canton?
I, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I can certainly get that information for you.
And one last question. Do you know what the total value of all the real estate in Milton is?
Yeah, it's here someplace.
The total taxable value is $4,323,171,659.
And have you determined what the value is of the non-taxable?
I don't have that number with me, but I believe that's in the neighborhood of $540 million.
Would that include town-owned properties?
Correct, yes.
Nonprofits, churches, everything?
Yes.
As well as much of the open space that's Blue Hills and
Right.
that area too. Anybody have any further questions?
Well,
We do have a motion before us.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt a minimum residential factor of 97.8236, to not adopt a residential exemption, to not adopt an open space discount, and to not adopt a small commercial exemption.
second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
We thank you.
You're welcome.
Good job.
We need signatures at the bottom there, okay. Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda is discussion of the annual audit report by Powers and Sullivan. Amy?
And Mr. Chair, do we want to have Chris Heavey and Bill Lovett join us on the audit committee, or
Sure.
they're present?
Yes.
We also have a new member, Kathleen
Oh.
White.
Oh, why don't you guys?
All want to kind of come on up and get cozy around the table?
How are you?
Hi there.
Eric, if you want to introduce yourself and your staff to the...
Sure. My name is Richard Sullivan. I'm the engagement partner to the town for the annual audit. Beside me is Catherine Sinisi, and Katie is the kind of the person that manages the field work, most of the field work during the audit. There were two other people in the engagement. They're not here. One is Haley, and then the other one is Jake. Jake's our new person. We tend to always have somebody new all the time to integrate them into the process. And what I thought I'd do tonight, if this is okay with you, unless you have questions you want to start off with, is give you an overview of how the process went, get you, so you can understand what we do, and then some of the observations that we had as a result of the audit work that we did.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Okay, great. When we come in, we have to look at a number of things, and what we call it the control environment. So every year when we're assessing and planning for the engagement, we kind of try to determine, and this is usually done in the spring, if anything has changed, personnel-wise, policy-wise, system-wise, and we design our audit plan based on what we knew coming in, because you're a client that we've had in the past, anything new that we find out as a result of that work. Now, that occurred in May. So we usually spend a week out here, and in the May timeframe, we can do pieces of the audit that what I call a non-time sensitive, meaning they don't have to be as of June 30th. You've already passed the budget, which we have to audit for compliance. Most of the time, all the long-term debt has been done so that anything related to that can be audited. There's also federal grants that the town receives that we have to also audit in compliance with A133. We try to get all that stuff done in the springtime so that we have we have an efficient audit come after year end, but also it doesn't elongate the process, meaning like we have a time schedule just like you do. We don't try to spend any more time out here in interfering with the day-to-day operations as we can. The year-end work was right at the end of August. It was for 2 weeks, and it started on August 27th. I emphasize that because that's a fairly good closing of the books. There's a number of our clients that can't get the books closed that fast. So we've tended to have this as our beginning of our audit date for a number of years now, and I was pleased that we were able to maintain that date. The first drafts went out in the beginning of September, which is a goal of ours to always try to get things out quickly. I would say September 10th, I think it was. And there's always a little back and forth. We have to chase some legal letters and things like that before we can issue the finals, but the finals were issued in the beginning of November. So, and those are the documents that you have in there, the 3 documents you have there. Just to give you an idea of what our opinion is all about, which is really only 2 pages on the financial statements, it talks about the full accrual basis statements, it talks about the fund-based statements, it looks at the proprietary funds, it also involves the retirement system. To give you an idea of what we audit, there's two I call components of the audit that we think are important for us from a risk-based approach. One is we try to look at the transactions and do some what we call walkthroughs and testing of transactions, where we look at the revenue cycle, we look at the payroll cycle, we look at the vendor disbursement cycle, and we also test journal entries. And to give you an idea about journal entries, there are certain journal entries that are made by the town accountant that are in the normal course of business and need to be made. But journal entries also can be used to correct things that were done incorrectly in the beginning. And we like to determine if there's been maybe a design flaw in the way things are posted, because if we see a lot of journal entries that are correcting things, that means there might be something wrong. So we test samples of all of them. I can share with you that of that sample that we took, which was about 150 altogether, of taking them all in collectively, we didn't find anything that warranted disclosure to you folks as something as being wrong or a design error.
Typically look at large journal entries near the end of the year.
Yep, particularly near the end of the year or after the end of the year, because you're looking for things that maybe like, I gotta reconcile this, I gotta reconcile that, because it wasn't being reconciled during the course of the year. Then we walk down the balance sheet. Your big assets are obviously cash, receivables, and your capital assets. And just to give you an idea, $30 million in cash at the end of June, on June 30th. We also look at your debt, your bonded debt, which is almost $43 million at the end of the year. And the other big liability you have on the books right now, and we've talked about this a lot, is that OPEB liability, that other post-employment benefit liability, which right now, at the end of the year, is $16.7 million. So that's called the substantive part of it. Now, all during the course of this, we also do what I call analytics. We've done the test of transactions, we've done some compliance testing, we've done what I call substantive testing, and then we just determine, when you look at things, are things lining up right? You know, because of 2.5 and certain things we know about projects that you have, we would expect an expenditure pattern to change so much from one year to the other, and a revenue pattern to change from one year to the other. And we look for things like that, and that's part of our audit process too. And finally, we do something called cutoff testing. And one of the things about cutoff testing is to make sure that things that should be reported in fiscal 12 are reported in fiscal 12 and not being necessarily pushed off to fiscal 2013. So that's kind of like how we do it. To give you a really high view of our overall results, the financial statements have an unqualified opinion. which is the accountant's negative way of saying everything is fine. It's in conformance with GAAP. We applied certain accounting standards, or I should say auditing standards, to come to that conclusion, and it's also in compliance with government auditing standards, as well as the GASB, which is kind of defines as a subcomponent of GAAP, which says this is how the financial statements have to be presented for a city or town in Massachusetts. I'll share with you that I think that it was a good timing for the schedule for us to come in. The team that we work with in the town accountant's office and the treasurer's office was audit ready. They prepared for us. They shared a sense of urgency like we do when we come in to try to get the job done as efficiently as possible. The information that we received was accurate.
No significant audit adjustments, or?
No, that's what I was just going to say. We did not propose, nor did we determine there should be any adjustments to the books, what we call permanent adjustments, meaning we audit something, we find it's wrong, and we request the town accountant to make an entry to make it right. And that's a big part of what we do, not only from the journal entry testing I talked about before, but we want to make sure that the numbers have been properly posted into the proper accounts, both from an expenditure and a revenue side, as well as the proper statement of the assets and liabilities that appear on the balance sheet. So that was going to be my last comment. I'm glad you mentioned it. On a very high level, when you look at FY12 and FY11, the results for this year were actually good. And one of the trends I've seen is your fund balance has risen since 2009 by more than 2.5 times. And I think if anybody was here, and some of the times we were talking, when I would be before you, in 2009, you were less than 2%, your fund balance, unreserved fund balance, was less than 2% of your total appropriations. Now it's about 4.7. That's great. And then you've also been able to develop the Capital Stabilization Fund, which increased a little bit in fiscal 2012, and also your normal operating stabilization fund, which I think ended the year at $2.7 million.
We now have a policy to put a percentage of our total operating revenue into.
It's a terrific
stabilization
policy, because there was a time when the community was just breaking even and didn't have any reserves, which means that you probably could not make it through any significant changes in your revenue stream. The town is not dependent on the state as much as other communities, so some of the state 9C cuts and all that things did not affect you as much, but you still recognize the fact that this is not really the way to run a business. If you look at it that way, that you do need reserves. And I was very happy to see that those reserves have built up. Another thing that I note, and we kind of, from an analytics standpoint, is we look to see, are you still collecting the high percentage of your receivables as the bills go out? And real estate and personal property taxes have been right around at 98% for the last few years, and that's been consistent, which I'm glad to see. It hasn't deteriorated or increased. Both enterprise funds showed a profit, which is what you need to have happen. That includes that because of the way these are presented, the proprietary funds, enterprise funds, are reported on the full accrual basis of accounting, which includes your capital assets, which includes your debt, but also includes an expense called depreciation, which is not a non-cash expense. It still showed profits of almost $400,000 in the water and $560,000 in the sewer, which is important because it also is a way for you to fund future capital improvements as well as meet your debt service costs for the principal portion of your debt. The pension plan had a new actuarial. Right now, it's 77% funded, which I think is pretty good, considering that the report for 2011, like most retirement systems in 2011, had a loss on its investments. It was very small, as a percentage, it was probably less than 1%, but you still were able to manage to have a almost break-even type thing from one valuation to another, and still increase your funded percentage, which I think is good. It went from 74% to 77% between the last two actual evaluations. And your internal service fund, which is where you pay your health insurance and so forth, that actually went up a little bit too, because that actually had a loss in fiscal 2011 and it had a small profit in fiscal 2012. Other, maybe what I would call significant activity is you continued on your, with the capital asset activity in terms of some of the improvements you've been making. Most of those were related to infrastructure. You had a, I just forgot about these, drainage. You had a big drainage project that was going on.
Still ongoing, yeah.
Right, and you also invested in your sewer infrastructure, also water and sewer. And there was some minor building modifications and renovations that were made to a series of buildings like the police station, some at the school. And that totaled all together for fiscal 2012, about $2.7 million. To fund that, you had had some bans outstanding. At the beginning of the year, you borrowed $4 million to pay off the bans as well as fund those projects. And you also borrowed another $1.9 million that went into the medical emergency fund to take care of the requirements that were needed there. So in total, you borrowed $6 million for fiscal 2012. So what I would share with you, at least from our perspective, from an audit perspective in terms of what you want to know from an authorization and a reporting perspective, is that the information that was being shared with you by the town accountant's office on a regular basis was absolutely the same thing that we ended up reporting on the financial statements. It looks a lot different, I'm sure. Probably the closest thing that you have in terms of what in this reports that would look like you may have received during the year is on page 52, I believe. It's called the budget to actual schedule, which is really the type of accounting that you manage yourself with. The rest of it just builds up to modified accrual basis and then full accrual basis, which is the net assets. If somebody was going to look at the net asset schedule, which is on the first, oh, I have the page numbers.
13.
I'm not a big page turner, but
Page 13.
thank you. Those pages, you'll see that there's a decrease in your net assets of about $7.6 million, I think it was, which in essence is like having a loss on the books. The reason for that big loss or change is because your OPEB liability went up over $6 million. And that's that one where I think we know what it is. It's that it's the ARC payment that's supposed to be made, and it's not being fully made because you're meeting your pay-as-you-go piece of it for the retirees that exist right now and the health insurance that they have, but you're not meeting the piece of the ARC that's supposed to go be set aside to accumulate so that 30 years down the road, you'll be able to meet your full
So
obligation.
right now, our OPEB's about 28 million,
That's correct.
and we have about an $11 million deficit unrestricted
Because
fund
all,
balance because of the 28 million.
absolutely. There's a $28 million liability in your books that didn't exist before GASB 45. And that, if you could just took that liability off your books, that would flip that $11 million to a
About 11
positive
million.
24.
Yeah, positive, yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right, or 14 million, I should say.
Now, how many communities have you seen starting to fund their GASB 45 liability?
It's a great question. There are more and more communities doing it. Some are doing it what I would call in a symbolic nature. They're putting $200,000 in their budget to begin the process of involving it and having it addressed every year in the budget year. There are some communities that are close to being fully funded on their ARC. Some of them are, the ones that come to mind are Wellesley, who had the good fortune at one point in time, before the market crashed, to have a fully funded pension plan. So they took the appropriation that had been going to the
Kept on
retirement
with it.
system and just diverted into OPEB. Brookline has been very aggressive in doing that. For the most part, all the other communities, they're putting between $200 to $1.2 million away, the ones that are doing it now. And that is still really a long way from where they need to be, but they're trying to build up the process of actually starting the process of having the constituents recognize that there's a liability out there, that it needs to be funded. And I think long-term, people are saying that if we can get our retirement system funded, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to continue that appropriation and put it into OPEB. The problem with some of them is that I think you have a fairly good funded ratio right now. You're 11 years away from being fully funded.
Right.
There are folks out there that are 18, 19, 22 years away from
Yeah,
being
the
fully
liability's
funded because
gonna be
they
huge,
elected
but-
the new PERAC rules that allowed them to go out almost 40 to 2040. So I'm going to guess of the clients that I'm aware of, probably about 8 of them are in the process of having an OPEB trust of which money is going into. And the size of it just varies by client, from client to client.
I mean, there is an advantage to doing that because it actually reduces the liability because of the interest assumption that you.
Yes, it does. And of course, there's also, a lot of folks have been design changes in their plans. GIC has assisted in that a little bit. And also, if they're maintaining their plans, not through the GIC, the design changes which reduce the overall cost are helping to reduce the OPEB liability because that factor it's an exponential type calculation.
That's a good point, because we did have a design change in 2000, was 2011? 2012. Yeah.
2012.
Was that reflected in those, it has not been reflected in those actual assumptions yet, because that was done?
So we're due for another
Okay,
valuation, which will take place, by the time they
in
finish up
13?
the 13 audit.
Okay. So that may reduce that well, it won't reduce it, but it may shrink the growth of it a little bit.
Right, right.
Okay.
So I mean, again, I'm happy that the last 2 years have shown what I think a really substantial increase, certainly percentage-wise, in your unreserved fund balance position and the stabilization fund positions. Those were, I think, great hurdles for the town to get through. And if you're, from an audit perspective, both as a businessman who wants an efficient engagement, as well as a person who has to have that professional skepticism when I'm walking around, as is Katie, we were pleased with the results of our testing and the results in the report.
You did issue a management letter, so if you
We
want to...
did. If you want, though, I can just take you 30 seconds to talk about that other report on the federal awards report. 'Cause
Okay,
we're
CFA,
talking
yep,
about.
mhm.
There's, the CFA, right, that is required under federal guidelines because you receive expend more than $500,000 worth of federal funds. You spent $2.5 million in fiscal 2012. Most of it is sped, but we didn't have to test sped this year. What we did is we tested the school lunch program and the Ed Jobs grants that you received.
Always have to get you 25% coverage.
Thank you very much for that, you're reading it. What you want to do is, when there's 3 reports in there, and the keys are, one is compliance with laws and regulations on the financial side, one is compliance with the administration of the grants, and the other one is a report on whether or not the CFA is accurately reported in conformance with A133. All 3 reports were clean opinions. No findings, no question costs. The management letter. Basically, when you get down to that's the document we own, kind of, because it's authored by us and influenced by the things that we've noted in the past, as well as things we note as part of this current year audit. I should start off just the comments related to it, is that in the first page, there's a report, it's not an opinion, but it basically tells you what you should expect when you're looking at the report. And the words that you don't want to hear me talking about are deficiency or significant deficiency or material weaknesses. There's none of those here, which should provide you with some comfort. However, kind of like under the SAS 112 guidelines, we would say we have to communicate certain things, and some things we believe are warranted, we put them in writing. And that's what you have in front of you in terms of the 11 comments, I believe, that are in this year's document. I'm sorry, I think there's 17 comments in there. 11 from the prior year and 6 that we introduced for this year. The prior year comments, unlike in the past, only 2 of them were resolved fully in fiscal 2012. I think there's been efforts made, such as in comp abs, in tailings, where there was improvements already, and even in cross-training. I know that things occurred in fiscal 2012 that are better than 2011, but for instance, if you take the cross-training, we'd like to see them documented versus just communicated, because I think documentation is a real big part of that. When you look at the comp abs, there was an attempt to automate the process. However, that first attempt didn't quite make it, and we're looking for other solutions to do so. Purchase order system was implemented, which I was very happy to see, as well as the, what was the other one? There was another one.
Actually, the PO is still
Well, it's
Yep.
still there.
open.
I thought it was done, fixed.
Looks like the schools
If
have it, but
I may comment on the management letter, because you just hit on one of my concerns. I like having you as the auditor very much, because I read
Purchase order was not done.
I read what you say as telling it what it is, and I appreciate your directness, and listen carefully to and read carefully what you write, and I thank you for it, because you want to get, when you pay an auditor money, you want to get your money's worth. So I have a couple of past concerns that you mentioned, like last year you mentioned You talked about the treasurer's office. You talked about the change where Mr. Sorgi, without mentioning names, Mr. Sorgi had left, Mr. McAuliffe had assumed the treasurer's role. You were suggesting that there be some organizational changes there. And if I'm reading this audit report, you're reporting good news that the treasurer's office has set up a new filing system to accommodate the needs of his staff.
Has been
So
improved.
you gave a constructive criticism, the treasurer responded, and hopefully the effectiveness of the treasurer's office is now improved.
Correct.
Now, so I don't have a concern about that anymore because you raised a constructive criticism, the treasurer addressed it. Where I do have a concern, a continued concern, is you mentioned that there's a new software system for purchase orders, but that only the school department has followed your recommendation. And you're saying, if I read you correctly, that it's important that all departments consider your advice because you want to make sure that the town's expenditures and finances are spent correctly, and you don't ever want us to get into a situation where we're paying for items that say we didn't receive. So my question is, are we going to be heading in that direction where the suggestion is that all departments follow that purchasing order system? Are we heading in that direction? Or do we still feel that the way we currently do things, that's a good way? Yeah, I'm throwing this out, yeah.
It's my opinion right now, you need the funding to implement something like that, and that's not inexpensive. It's my belief it would be a pretty big project, not sure of what the price tag on it would be. I think the fact that the schools are using a purchase order system, the DPW is using a purchase order system, although it's not as automated, correct, Joe? That the rest of the departments, their budgets are manageable enough that they're doing a great job managing it, and it hasn't been an issue. We haven't had any problems. It's certainly something we can undertake, but I think there's a few things ahead of that in the list to do, and I'm a strong believer of one project at a time if you want to do it right. So that's why, that's been my response to Powers and Sullivan when they've asked me the progress of that. I haven't felt that at this point it's a priority, also taking into consideration the probable cost that it would cost the town to implement it.
And I think the problem you have too is because we're desegregated in terms of our
Yes.
purchasing, we don't have a purchasing
Person.
function.
Right.
So there is no central place for purchase orders to originate from or funnel through.
Right.
So it's only, it would be very difficult to do. I mean, I would still like to see at some point in time
Right.
that we do centralize our procurement and purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we will get there someday. And I think when we do, then the purchase order system becomes much more effective than it would be on a disaggregated basis.
Totally agree with that. And I think that is something that the Town Government Study Committee, not necessarily the purchase order specifically, but the fact that it is desegregated, and it does make things like that a little bit more challenging.
Okay.
Do you see this in towns of similar sizes, Milton, that have a POS?
It varies. It varies from community to community. There's been a real push towards automated purchase order systems and well, I won't say centralization, but centralization of the monitoring of them, because particularly because the IG's office has been pushing for everybody having a procurement officer in every community, and has been they've been doing some, let's say, investigation/studies in some places where 30B isn't being followed properly, and for some of the school projects, I think it's 39 and 649, they don't necessarily follow the same way. So I would say that not only does our firm like to see them, because the encumbrance process is a lot better. In other words, it's not necessarily that something would be overspent because the bill has been, a check's going to be cut that is over the budget appropriation line item. It's the commitment to spend money that could go over the appropriation line item that really can't be monitored anywhere else but at the department level. And it's our philosophy that there should be the ability to have a little higher look at that without having to be into the detail of each department.
Agree with that.
So there's, I think what we call unresolved, or things that still are being worked on, is very clear. There's, again, of the 11, we had 2 that were resolved. And I didn't mean to say purchase orders, I meant to say the organizational change, which got to the level where it could be resolved. And there was also, we had recommended there, a cash and investment policy had been developed, but we recommended it be formalized, and that was also taken care of too.
Now, the payroll and vendor activity, which is basically the cash book on QuickBooks, has that now been corrected? I thought we had corrected that.
Pardon?
The use of the QuickBooks, have we got away from that at this point? or-
We are in the transition period. We went live with the new software on September
Yeah,
1st.
which is, the name always escapes me. but-
Zobrio,
Zobrio, okay.
cash management.
Yep.
It has helped, but the treasurer's office is still running dual systems as far as the
Okay.
cash book, because he wants to be comfortable enough that everything reconciles
Mhm.
before he
Flip the
puts
switch.
QuickBooks aside. So the plan is by the end of December
Okay,
is our plan, is that he will no longer be using the QuickBooks.
okay. Yeah, and that's huge, because, I mean, it's going to make it an integrated, much more integrated system with the accounting system.
Right, and we've already seen a lot of benefits just in the fact that the whole process seems to have been streamlined, you know, one point of entry, the rest is just completely approving and accepting the batches, less data entry time, and also now the departments have that information of what they've entered at their fingertips. They have it on their desktops, as opposed to everything before that was really paper, because when you looked in the system, you didn't have a reference to who the check was from, who the cash was from. Now you have a system where they type in who the person it is that's paying the money, so that then they can go back and search by, the name, by the dollar amount, by the date, by the deposit date. So it's really much easier when you're trying to find something. In the past, we've had where the school, if something got miscoded and a department said, I had $1,000, I can't find it anywhere in my numbers, we'd have to go to the paper backup to try to find it. Now we can search by $1,000 or, roughly in the date. So it's really streamlining the whole process. It's just making it so much easier, and any of that data can be downloaded very easily into Excel, which will also help with a lot of the remote departments not maintaining that same information in Excel, because now they have it right there on their computer in this program, and if they need it in Excel, they can easily just press a button and it's in Excel. So I think it's going to be a very good tool.
Can I ask a question? Does that address the current year comment regarding the cash accounts?
Which one? I think there's more than
I
that.
think it will. Because
That's a pretty significant.
I would think that a lot of the comments as they relate to cash in the treasurer's office should be taken care of with the full implementation of the system. That's my expectations for 2013.
And we have worked towards some of that, and especially in the payroll and the vendor. Those were never monitored, not monitored, that sounds bad, but those weren't put in so we had QuickBooks, and then we had our accounting system, and the treasurer's office maintained a certain level of detail in QuickBooks, and then I would reconcile QuickBooks to the town's records. Now that it's all going to be one, we are downloading the vendor activity and the payroll activity right into QuickBooks. So it's much easier for him. He doesn't have to key anything, whereas those were always, in his mind, zero balance accounts, that you funded the account for the amount of the checks that were written, as opposed to now the checks are being loaded in there so he can easily get a list of outstanding checks and whatnot. So that should definitely address that one. And then we have had discussions towards the end of the audit with the treasurer's office that of the importance to report all bank accounts in QuickBooks, that we can't have some not in QuickBooks but in Zobrio, that now's the time that we need to make this program, or investing it, full circle to include everything. So we've had conversations with his office, my office, and Powers and Sullivan of the importance to do that. And I think we're all on the same page with that. He's on board with doing that. Again, we're in the early stages, so he's gradually bringing them on so that by the end of the fiscal year, it should be completely up and running, including all the accounts is the plan.
And then some of the new comments, just to throw those out. One is informational, just to maintain the actuarial studies that need to be done so that you don't have a qualified opinion in your financial statements. We touched base on the cash accounts, which I think were reflected in the last conversation. Police details, our thought process is there's got to be a better way to account for it. There's nothing than the receivables and, the handoff to the handoff to the handoff. This is more an efficiency comment than an internal control comment, but I always feel that if you're more efficient, you can have better controls, because instead of trying to keep up with the pace of it, you get to actually look at what you're doing and reflect on it, analyze it. There's a minor issue with what we call the overtime budget for the police. We actually caught this in some of our testing, and we wanted to highlight it. This was that cutoff testing we were talking about was something that got posted into 2013 that should have been taken care of in 2012. A journal entry was appropriately done to get it into 2012. And then there was just a little bit of, we would like to see a little more information related to deferred real estate tax, but actually that comment was taken care of very quickly after year end. So, I mean, I don't want to gloss over anything, to be honest with you, but I don't want to drill down where drill down isn't necessary. Again, the good thing is there's no material weaknesses, there's no significant deficiencies, and I think that's, from your side of the table, that's where I'd have some concerns.
Great. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? Good. Okay. Thank you very much, Dick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Dave.
Thank you.
How long did this take?
How long did that take?
Thank you.
Dick? Approximately how many hours?
For us to do?
Yeah, ballpark.
Boy, oh boy. It's usually between, depending on the year, I'd say between 430 and 500.
Thanks.
And what are the costs?
About 50.
See you later, Chris.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now we have a discussion of the gas main project at Brush Hill Road. We have a representative from National Grid here. Hi, Joe, do you want to also come up and just kind of join us? Hello, gentlemen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Just introduce yourselves and.
My name is Dennis Regan, and I'm the permit representative for National Grid. My name is Peter Nagel. I'm the manager of community and customer management for National Grid.
And I guess the reason, well, I mean, there's a couple of reasons that we wanted you to come before us tonight. One, and I guess the most pressing one right now, is my understanding is that there was a request for a permit to open the street on Brush Hill Road to run a gas line across the street, not a main, just a line. That permit was denied, but the street was opened anyways, and I want to know how that happened.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, the initial permit was a request for a main to go across the street.
Okay.
With a branch service to serve an individual home. Subsequent to that unfortunate incident, it has since moved to a service, but we can get to that as well. To be clear, the lifeblood of our business are permits. It enables us to be in your community. It enables us to provide safe, reliable service. And secondarily, obviously, it enables us to grow our business. So that lifeblood is something that we take very seriously and do not want to impede in any way. The Brush Hill Road incident simply boiled down to a matter of human error. The permit was received back with the denial on the permit itself. Normally, that would finish the project, or in some cases, admittedly, will have a discussion with Public Works and Engineering folks. We have a good enough relationship to do that. That was not the case on this particular permit. It was simply put in the work packet, which was then in turn sent to the field or to our district office to, not to encumber logistically, but those permits are processed in our Waltham headquarters and then are directed to our field operation for the main Milton division, Milton location. It's our Braintree operating division.
And does the field office actually get a copy of the permit?
The field ops actually gets a copy of what we call a packet, which would be work specs, a whole host of the dig safe sign-offs, the copy of the permit from the municipality in question, among other technical specs, if you will, for a job.
Okay, and somehow they just didn't see the denial on the permit when they?
The work packet never should have made it to the field location or to the branch division. Similarly, in what can only be described as an unfortunate set of circumstances, I can only assume the supervisor leafed through the packet, saw the permit in hand, and proceeded to dig on Brush Hill Road, at which time the town immediately suspended the operation, and we obviously complied with that, with the unknowingly digging into the street with a denied permit, which is something that is not our practice. It is not something that we want to do. It's obviously something that very rarely, if ever, occurs. Can't say if ever, but it is not something that we want to have transpire, obviously.
Okay. I mean, I know in the past we've clearly always had a good working relationship with.
And we feel the same way. That's why I tried to preface my remarks with the conversations that our field folks have almost on a daily basis with both Public Works, Engineering, public safety officials as well.
I mean, are there any changes that can be made to make sure this doesn't happen again?
It is, there's several layers on that. Obviously, the work packets will not be processed with a denied permit. We've asked for a more definitive delineation on the denied permit as well. Not, by no means am I putting any, just to be clear, it's just another measure to preclude this incident. Mm-hmm. Again, the supervisors are reminded he or she needs to read both sides of a permit before he or she commences work on a job as well. And typically, both Dennis and I will have conversations with field personnel as well, because typically we will know about a job. Not all of them, obviously, there's a lot of jobs out there, but we'll have conversations with those with that field personnel as well. And the only caveat to operating a job without a pre-issued permit would obviously be on an emergency basis, where we would apply the next day. Mm-hmm. As an emergency leak would be the pretty much the lone example of that.
Now, typically, you don't have to come before the Board of Selectmen if you're running a main, is that what? Or how does that work, Joe?
It's actually the other way around. If there's a street that does not have gas in it presently, and they wish to bring gas down,
that would require
they require the permit that's granted by the Board of Selectmen through, after a public hearing process, is called a grant of location.
But to connect to a main is...
Right, but once the main is in place, because you gave permission for the main to be there, it's also built within the prescription of that original permit, permission to the gas company for them to connect services to that main.
Okay.
And that only requires a street opening permit, so.
That's just done by DPW.
What differentiates this location from all others, for the most part, is the fact that there isn't a main in the street, in the public way, and that they were proposing to connect this property in question beneath our street and then onto another private property by way of an easement. So this is a unique circumstance. I mean, I'm not making excuses for them. They understand they made a mistake.
Yep.
I can say emphatically, we must issue 150 to 200 permits a year to the gas company on a very regular basis, several under routine circumstances, several under emergency circumstances.
And that brings up the second question is now, we're not running a main, we're just running a line across the street to service one home, and
Yes. Which
that
still
would seem very, very out of the ordinary.
Based on the post-incident from the post-shutdown, based on the conversations, a whole host of conversations that we've had among town resident and company officials, it was determined that the course of action would be to run from the private property a 1-inch service across through the public way onto the private property across the street to serve the location.
Okay. And that's not typical, though, correct? I mean, the typical situation would be to run a main, or at least a small main out there, so that more than one person can connect?
Typically, these are at the discretion of the grantor, in this case, the town of Milton, so typically that is how, and we cannot arbitrarily put in a main to serve future customers. It's not allowed in our rate base. So the proponent at this point is the lone recipient of that, and the 1-inch crossing of the street will, in fact, serve that customer.
Okay. Now, would other people be able to tie into that 1-inch main, or that's not main, but that 1-inch?
That would be determined by our engineering folks, sir, and so I'd have to know more specifics in terms of a load for that proposed property.
Is the main you were tapping into, is that on private property? That's on Fuller Village, right?
It is, yes, that's correct.
But that's your pipe, obviously.
Yes, it is, sir, yes.
So would you have to have an easement across their property?
On their property to
Yeah.
the outline of the public way.
An easement and then a permit to cross the street,
That's correct.
and then onto private property again?
Correct, which our SLA, service line agreement with the customer, would grant that part of it as well.
How far, did you dig the street where you cross?
We started to dig into the street. That is when we were stopped by the town officials.
And usually, like dig safe and all that, was that called before you dig any street?
Correct, but water and sewer is not part of DigSafe. And given the, water and sewer as a municipality is not part of DigSafe. Telephone, electric, cable TV, gas company, those are the subscribers. But through the street opening permit process, so
That's my question, actually. Do you?
that's how we do our markouts. That's how we do our water and sewer and drain markouts, is when they apply for the street opening permit.
So you request a dig safe number before
They-
you release a permit?
They give us the DigSafe number and the effective dig date, when it's valid. So that's part of the permit application, so we had a clearance from their, assurances on the application. Now, as a matter of efficiency, what we do is when we get an application, it's a multi-part copy, we also kick it out to our field people so we can start our markouts, when it's not raining. We have an opportunity to get our markouts done, whether they used it or it's sort of immaterial. So we had actually marked that location out for water and sewer. So there was no damage done, but it was a little more than just dug into the road. They were down there complete. It was dug all the way across, the new pipe was laid in, and they were, for all intent and purpose, they were complete. Mr. Hurley asked Peter, what is it that they might have done to take actions to prevent this in the future. And we've done something similar. Rather than writing denied, permit denied, and for reasons in a comment line, clearly stated in English, I've told my men, do that, and at the top of the permit, in big marker, write denied. So when they fold it up and into a folder, it's obvious it's denied. So this, we're trying to help them flag it for the future.
That's the only-
150
That's the only one you've denied since I've been doing
Well, I
this.
was gonna say 150 to 200 a year, and this is a rarity, so.
Can I ask Joe, why was it denied?
Hmm?
Why was the permit
Because they
denied?
didn't have a granted location to be in the street, because there was no facility in the street. So we couldn't issue a permit until you people issued your permit, because there is no gas facility in the street. Just like the gas company needs an easement from Fuller, the gas company needs an easement from the town to have their pipe in our street. And my street opening permit doesn't do that. It only gives them permission to open the street.
Right. So what's the procedure in getting?
I think we've worked that out.
We'll have to come back with the petition describing what we're going to do with the set of drawings and leave them with you, and we'll get a date for a hearing, because we have to notify the abutters, and there's so many days that that it takes to process the.
Why do you have to
but-
notify the abutters?
Because it's
It's a public hearing.
It's a public hearing for the grant hearing
Yes,
is
it's a
public.
public hearing.
So assuming you get this plan in, we'll say this week, or this next week, when can we expect to possibly approve
It's
this?
a process.
Earlier this evening, you gave two coming December meetings.
December 20th.
So
December 20th?
You're meeting December 6th and December 20th, and you obviously can't make your December 6th date, which is next Thursday, so our
We don't
next
have time
meeting
to-
would be December 20th.
Paula, do you know what timetable, what's the deadline that the gas company needs to get you something to hit that December 20th date without compromise? What, do you know?
And that would be for the 20th? The 20th. Yeah, that would be fine, it just didn't, yeah.
What I've offered to do also is encourage Dennis to submit a road opening permit yet again, get it into us, because we know what it's going to look like.
Yep.
We'll get that whole process complete. So the
as soon as
day,
we approve
on the
it.
21st, that road opening permit's out. No delay.
And at your discretion, sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
At your discretion, you can grant it, even though we're going to be on the November deadline for opening streets.
As long as the weather holds up.
Right.
Last year, we dug year-round. Yeah, again, if we have a snap in the weather, things, all bets are off, but I think in this instance, it's not that difficult. It isn't as though they're laying 400 feet of main, they're literally going 24 feet across a paved roadway and through, 20 feet of shoulder, 10 feet on either side. It's pretty easy operation.
I think our chairman asked earlier, it's kind of highly unlikely that somebody would tap into a 1-inch line, right?
So what's that
If
again?
somebody built next door, they wouldn't tap into a 1-inch.
Well, this depends on the pressure. Normally, no. Most of the elevator pressure lines we have are at least 2-inch mains
Right.
in most places, and up, considering whatever the load's going to be.
And just to clarify, the DPU regs do not allow us to, at one time, we were able to install a main and stub 2 property lines. Those are not, that is something that we are not able to do in an arbitrary basis.
What does that mean exactly?
For instance, you're building you're a developer building a subdivision, homes 1, 4, and 8 in that plot plan are gonna have gas service. However, your others, you're not sure, dependent upon a buyer. You're the developer, you're gonna say, can you stub 2, 5, 7 to the property line, and then the owner would then, the onus would be on that
Yeah, the cost of
to,
running.
right, and that is something that we're not allowed to do.
Do you have to run it to everybody or none?
Or make arrangements at that future date when that prospective property 2, 5, or 7 came in for a request for a gas service.
I see, okay.
And the opposite of that is also true nowadays, under the same reg, I think, is that a customer who may currently have gas and converts over to another form of energy, they're then obligated to come on. You have to dig that service at the main and cap it.
5 years.
No, we're required, cut and cap within a year.
Within a year.
Oh,
So they cannot leave those abandoned stubs, even though they previously had gas.
So now, what happens if we allow this thing to happen, and this one-inch pipe goes across, and the person next door says, well, I want gas too? I mean, haven't we essentially stubbed it the same way?
The answer is yes. No, well, the answer is yes, that we talked about how unusual this is. Typically, there would be gas in the street, and if it's there, you tap into it. And if it's not there, you would extend the main to serve that next customer. That opportunity doesn't present itself now because of the limitation of this one-inch service. My understanding is, and I haven't seen it, I'm not sure you have, seen a final easement agreement from Fuller Village, but my understanding is that that easement document restricts what the gas company can do, that it is in fact not larger than a one-inch service, and that it serves only this one property. So it actually is restricted to that extent.
Can I ask where the gas main, does it come in from 138 to Fuller Village? Or does it come up from?
Comes up from the Parkway. Comes up at the Parkway to the Milton Health Center,
Yeah.
and then up to Fuller 2, and then up to Fuller 1, where it dead ends. Serves Fuller 1. It never gets out to 138. The nearest gas in 138 is Curry College, I believe.
Why wasn't that ever put into the street?
It's a gas company marketing issue, whether there's customers there.
Yeah, it's on private land all the way up.
Which the Fuller?
Yeah, Fuller, yeah.
Well, I don't know, I'm not sure where it originally came in from. It would have tied into a main someplace.
It does down at the Ponce Valley Parkway, down by the soccer fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, down by the Milton Health Center.
Milton Health Center, then up to building 1, is that what you call it? Up to
Fuller 2, which is
Fuller 2,
the
yeah.
newer one. Apparently Fuller 1 didn't have gas to begin with. They did a conversion once they got their second development in, and then they did an analysis of maybe the gas company sold a good marketing system and convinced them to extend it up to the second phase, the first phase, the second part of it, and then put the entire complex on gas. But it is not in the public way.
Probably less expensive to put it in private land, right?
It's not that unusual, sir. It could
Isn't
be.
it now?
No, it could be, you could live on, and I'm going to just give a hypothetical, you could live at 24 Oak Street, your neighbor could be at 48, and from 29 to 47, hypothetically, there could not be gas, but you as a resident at 24 could access as your further neighbors could, or similarly, there could be a main on the street, but in the development process, that developer chose not to put in a gas main, so it bypasses that whole street. So not every, well, would love to do it, not every resident has that ability to access gas at a simple service cost.
Well, I think in the interest of our family back here, the Millingtons, it would be great to get that plan in this week, if you could, Dennis.
Yes, yes, I
Get it on the agenda for the 20th.
Mr. Nagel, while you're here, and this is sort of, I'm wondering if there could be greater cooperation on the part of National Grid in the town, and I'm going to give you some information, and you can correct me if you feel I'm incorrect. There's a street down in East Milton, Governor's Road, that was recently, and it was known for a long period of time that it was going to be, it was one of a number of streets that was going to be paved. It was recently paved. And on the street today, there's gas lines being put in. It seems to me that that is doing things backwards, doing things incorrectly, that if you were going to dig a trench, you dig your trench first and then pave. And my understanding is that the town of Milton let the gas company know what their intentions were on Governor's Road prior to the pavement. So, so I guess what I'm saying is, do you agree with that? And if so, could we coordinate things better so trenches would be dug before you pave?
Obviously, that's the last thing we want to do is cut into a new street. And in terms of agreeing with you, yes, we have meetings a couple times a year in the sharing of information in terms of what's on our agenda and what's on the DPW and engineering agenda. Is it always perfect? No, but is it a significant step in the right direction? I think it is. And we meet annually as well to have that give and take to discuss, as well as far more frequently with the field personnel who are going in and on a more daily basis to hear, say, Reedsdale Road from X to Y is going to be paved in a couple of months or next season, in addition to the sharing of what we would both, I think, call our paving lists, which is both a tangible and a more esoteric plan.
I would like to echo Mr. Sweeney's comments and then maybe add something to that, if that's okay. And it's not a criticism so much as, because we work with you guys, but it is a criticism, so I apologize in advance. You guys did know about that street. You know about our paving program, you know about our water main replacement program, all of our construction. You know that what's going to happen next year, and we forecast what's going to happen the second and third year.
Right.
So you guys, in fact, have known about governors for 3 years. My understanding, and I do understand there's a lot about people as far as personnel at the gas company, but my understanding is there are competing interests for what I'm going to call capital gas main relays that you guys are planning to do versus emergency repairs that you have to do for leaks versus what you guys call encroachments, which under DPU you have to do, Department of Public Utilities you have to do. And though you saw that project looming, your capital people did not believe that the gas main needed to be done. Yet, it was clear that we were digging a water main there. It was an encroachment. We knew it was an encroachment. But I guess you guys don't compete for your encroachment money until after the fact. You can't say it's going to be an encroachment. You have to wait till it is an encroachment. And that's how these recurring street openings happen after and it wasn't finished pavement, thank God, because we had caught wind this was going to happen. We only got it to binder when we put the brakes on and didn't put the top on. But that's something we absolutely have to work on. Because we do have great communications with your engineering folk and through letters, and it's not just verbal, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere, so we got to improve upon that.
It definitely goes. And on point A, I think there is competition for that. I think, like every business, there's a set amount of money for main replacements, and obviously we try to do as much as possible. And I would think we have a fairly aggressive main replacement program. Those other parts of money are separate, so just on that but there are competing pots of money, and everything is engineered and valued on a algorithm that I'm not an engineer, so I don't really want to try to explain it, but it's a whole host of the age, the vintage of the pipe, the soil conditions, obviously leak histories and such. But there is to answer your direct question, yes, I am committed to working with making sure that happens, yes.
Thank you.
If the whole company was comprised of people like this, we wouldn't have a problem. These are the people who actually get it done for us, so we do appreciate that.
No, it was an unfortunate incident, but, mistakes happen, I guess. So I guess we'll look forward to seeing you back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you for the understanding. Again, our apologies, if you will, for, you have great folks representing you tonight.
Apology accepted.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9, is technical assistance grant, scope of work document. And this is also Joe, right? This is a grant to accept some services from the Department of Public, the Department of Environmental Protection. Why don't you explain, Joe, what...
Certainly. Milton is one of the more aggressive recycling communities in town, and our ratios are robust as compared to a lot of them. It makes us eligible for, and we have been applying for grants on a pretty recurring basis, and incrementally, we've been getting some pretty good grants. The technical assistance grant, 2 years in a row, is something we applied for and received. Last year, we got 80 hours of funding, which helped us navigate the waters of renegotiating the waste management contract. And that the Board of Selectmen created a solid waste advisory committee for that purpose. And part of our charge was to deal with the curbside collection under the waste management contract. And the second phase was to look at the recycle center and the services provided there. This grant is to take that second step, and we were successful in getting a 60-hour grant, and we're asking you to let us accept their services for free.
I'm not going to deny it. So we do have a motion before us.
Joe, tell me if this is correct. We had a solid yard waste committee. You chaired it, I was on it, and I thought it was a very valuable committee. We had a paid consultant.
That was the person, this is the same, it's exactly the same person.
I can say firsthand that that's extremely helpful.
Sure was.
Because the paid consultant was an expert in this field and helped us extend a contract that was in the best interest of the town.
Now, the bad news is, presuming you approve us entering into this agreement with the state, is we're going to be completing this effort, and we're going to reconvene that committee, so we're going to ask the Board of Selectmen to appoint another member to that Solid Waste Advisory Committee. And we're going to reconvene to complete our charge, which is the recycle center aspect.
A motion?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to accept a grant award for 60 hours of services provided to the Department of Public Works, Solid Waste Division, by the Department of Environmental Protection, valued between $5,000 and $6,000, and to approve a contract and scope of work document with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Second the motion.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, may as well just sit there, because you're...
I'm going to grab my paper.
Okay, item number 10 is FY14 budgets. And the first budget we're going to be looking at is the public works budget, which is actually two sets of budgets. One is the enterprise fund budgets, which is water and sewer, which are two separate budgets. And then the DPW budget, which comes out of the general fund, which is broken into three different budgets. There's the general DPW, there's solid waste disposal, and there is vehicle maintenance that comes under DPW. When I look at these things today, I'd like to combine three DPW budgets, I call them, into one, because it's easier to look at them, because things move around from year to year on them. It's hard to analyze them. But when we did notice that there was a couple of things missing. And
I believe the copies that were given to you this evening are the ones that address those concerns that Tom had noticed and Mr. Hurley had noticed.
It is not what's in the book.
It's not what's in the book?
It's right there, I gave you a revised one.
So basically, on the DPW side, the non-enterprise fund side, we've got a personnel budget of $976,000, which is, again, split between three budgets there, and a general expense line of $3,164,270 for a total of $4,140,270. And that is level dollar with fiscal year 13, with the exception of some one-time money that was in the fiscal 13 budget of $10,000 for sidewalk repairs. So the 14 budgets $10,000 less than the 13 budget because of that. And just looking through, Joe, again, I took the general, the Schedule E's and combined them all together, just to kind of look at them. There's a couple of things that jump out. One is on your general budget. First few items, building and grounds, other equipment, equipment rental, they were all budgeted fairly high in 13 and then significantly less in 14. I notice your actual expenditures in 12 are consistent with the 14 budget. Why were they budgeted so high in 13?
I really didn't know what to make of where the line was going to be drawn with consolidated facilities in Public Works at the time we drafted the budget and as the time we moved through before it closed the warrant. But subsequent to that and as that process evolved, it became clearer what it was we're actually doing with regards to the grounds work. One of the other things that really gave us a huge benefit is that we've had a lot of adopter sites, particularly the town hall site, where all the landscaping is done now by a private volunteer. And we also have volunteer efforts by the Milton Garden Club, and there's just a lot of that's happening on a community basis that we didn't anticipate in the beginning. And I didn't know how that boundary around this building in particular was going to weigh into consolidated facilities.
Okay, okay. And then there's a couple of, well, construction supplies, another one, $102,000 was the budget in FY13, $27,500.
Before we get into specifics, can I make one other notation change? And I
Sure.
would say it's a Scrivener's error, but on that same general Public Works budget expense, if you notice, I included in a request for $154,000 near the bottom for snow and ice.
Yes.
And it's policy to level fund that year to year.
Yeah, so it should be 150.
That should be 150, and what I'm hoping to do is to then
Move
that $4,000 up to the line called construction supplies to increase that from 27,250 as written to a new number called 31,250.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so, sorry about that. And now, I'm sorry, what was your question, Phil?
Okay, well, again, construction supplies were budgeted at $102,000 in FY13, and now they're $31,250. Again, why the, and again, the year before the actual was $39,000, so what was the thought process with them being high and then drop down so low in,
I think what we had hoped to do was to embark on more sidewalk paving and some more restoration of curbing in-house, but we didn't do it. We're trying to, I'm really trying to get, in fact, I think that's exactly why that $10,000 was added in as one-time expenditure, was for sidewalk repair. We just didn't have the manpower in place throughout the length of the fiscal year that really allowed us to do that. I am happy to report we're 100% staffed, with the exception of one vacancy for an employee that didn't work out, but we're in the midst of filling it. But on the contrary, this year, the sidewalks are something we're able to do more in-house and not necessarily spend a lot of money on the materials. I think we can do that for the I thought we could do it for the 27, but certainly can do a little more sidewalk for the 31 that I just bumped it up to.
Okay. And then we got $267,000 payments to contractors, which is an item that was not in your 13 budget. What does that cover? Again, it's in your general.
The general?
Payments to contractors, yeah, it's in the Schedule E general.
I'm seeing that. I'm not sure if that was spread to another line elsewhere and we just moved it into this. But what that type of work would be anytime we need to bring in like a traffic repair person to do any of the outside streetlights or the controllers and those devices, any contractors that we would need to do for like tree plantings, any emergency repairs to like larger stretches of areas, or any roadway resurfacing as a result of damage. It's not targeted to any particular item, but it does give me the ability to get that work done. Now, if we have a severe winter, it also gives me a cushion to absorb some of that blow on contractors who are in fact snowplow contractors.
Okay, makes sense. solid waste, the numbers are pretty consistent with, and that's all,
That's contract.
that's under the contract anyway.
That's correct. The
Contractual.
solid waste is recognizing we negotiated a one-year extension with an optional second-year extension. This is working into that second-year extension.
Okay. So we are going to have to renegotiate a contract in 14, and
We're going to,
for 15?
we're probably going to go through a similar process in whether we're satisfied with the services and do we want to extend yet again or put it back on the street. But these are actual contract numbers for the various items.
Okay. And single stream's been working out very well?
Single stream's not only working out very well, it was one of the premises on which the Solid Waste Advisory Committee used to negotiate the extension. Because we recognized the advantage to go into single stream, we actually reaped an ultimate benefit and a reduction in our collection costs. Not particularly in this year, but when you look at the 2 years combined, it was a net savings of where we were 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's working out very well.
Okay. And the only other thing, and I mentioned to Anne Marie, and it's because it's kind of unfair in this budget, just the way that we negotiated contracts this year with the 0.5% salary increase on the last day of the fiscal year. So because that was not in your FY13 numbers, because it didn't happen until, it won't happen until June 30th of 2013, so there's no financial impact in FY13. There's certainly a financial impact in FY14.
And it's included in my base budget. It's in here. It's worth about $20,000 in round numbers.
Right, but you have to kind of, basically, you're being required to absorb it because...
And I have. It's in here, including that 0.5% step
Right.
on at midnight.
Right.
But by doing that, you have
Right.
to reduce.
So ostensibly what that has done is hit to the tune of $20,000 other expense lines.
Right.
elsewhere in my- across the
Whereas
budget.
if we had negotiated the contract to give the 0.5% at the beginning of the year, then you would have gotten it. And so it's kind of not fair to your budget. But,
Well, maybe there'll be an adjusting article at town meeting perhaps.
well, we could at least mention to the warrant committee that it's kind of not fair, but I mean, it is what it is at this point.
But you're accurate, and this budget does include that increase. It also includes the increases that are in place with the clerical union, which has been negotiated. It does not include the Professional Management Association, so if, in fact, that's settled, that's going to be something that needs to be talked about as well. My numbers that are in here are, in fact, based on the FY 12 numbers, and that's it.
Okay, and position-wise, we've got one vacant position.
One vacant position. We were 100% within we have a 6-month probationary period for new hires, and there was a circumstance where it wasn't a good fit on one employee, and within that probationary period, he's moved on, and we're recruiting to fill that again.
Okay. And that's a total of
And I can-
26 positions on the crew
And I
side.
can tell you that the department is running like a machine. We've got really, really good, ambitious people. The older people who've been there a while are nurturing the younger guys along, younger people along, and it's an exciting time with the new blood.
Oh, it needs a new building.
Yes. Thank you.
Don't thank me yet. Does anybody else have any questions about the budget? Or?
I'm okay in this.
I'm fine with it, too. I do have a question. Back, maybe it was last meeting, there was a town meeting member, Steve Morash, that again brought to our attention the pavement on Central Avenue that's long overdue. My question is, well, I know we need to pave Central. Do we have Chapter 90 to get that job done, or do we have money in the budget?
It's not in the budget. In Chapter 90, we get about $600,000
Yeah,
a
we
year.
don't
It's a
get much.
$3.2 million project. It's an FY14 capital request.
Right.
It's before the Capital Improvement Committee.
Yeah.
It's listed as a number one priority for FY14. However, there's a bunch of number one priorities. We were told to rank them as far as severity.
There's $50 million worth of capital requests. We might be able to get to most of the number one priorities. I mean, yeah, basically, well, and you said the other day, if you get the 3, you don't need the 1.3 you're requesting for Chapter 90 makeup
What
money.
Mr. Hurley's referring to is that, Central Avenue aside for a moment, is that if you look at the life cycle of all of the pavement across the entire town, from our brand-new pavements all the way to the worst of pavements in town, and we rank them on a segment-by-segment basis. So we know where they are. We know in FY, particular year dollars, what the cost is, and we change that every year with our new estimate. We know priority ranking of where they fall into each other. If you take that on a recurring basis, if you take a look at the need, and then subtract from that what we have in our Chapter 90 funding, we fall short.
Big time.
What is it, I have the number, is it 1.2?
1.3.
1.3 million, 1.2, $1.3 million short every single year just to maintain our roadway system at the level we are. That's in as a recurring request, as a planning tool. I'm not saying we need to do it, we have to do it, I'm saying, but it's a planning tool. You need to know what's out there looming. So what Tom was saying is that also included on that list of all the needs is in fact Central Avenue. So if in fact you fund Central Ave unto itself, you can theoretically take 2 years of need off the list because you've done that street.
Kind of where we stand. Whether it'll get funded or not, I mean, that's going to be a committee decision. But
I haven't even formally presented. I come in Tuesday night to
Yes.
present before the board. The committee.
If I hear things correctly, Central Ave paving is before the capital needs.
It is before the Capital Needs Committee, yes. Yep. Okay, we do have a motion before us to approve and sign and forward to the warrant committee FY14 Department of Public Works budget in the amount of $1,842,000. Is that number still correct? What is the number?
FY14, is this Public Works General? General, correct? Are you moving them separately?
No,
No, it's-
no, it's
it's-
just one budget, so it would have to be the whole.
Yeah, that's Public Works General.
Yeah, so we have to add them all together.
Add all your personnel line and then add all your general expenses and voting this morning.
All my personnels and all my general for all 3? Yeah, so that number is very different. I hate to say I don't have that.
I've got the regular DPW. Let me see if I can add quickly the rest of them to it. Because we need the enterprise funds added to that? Okay, hang on one sec. Yeah, I will have it. Let me get to the right one.
Are you looking for bottom line for
It's
the,
bottom
for the
line, yeah.
3, or bottom line of all 5?
I think it's, yeah, it'd have to be all 5 because that's what we're forwarding. Get it in 1 second. I'm coming up with a total of $6,093,186. If I take all the Schedule As.
Including water, sir, I see that number, I agree with that number.
Okay, good. So the motion would be to approve and forward to the warrant committee the FY14 Department of Public Works budget in the amount of $6,093,186.
Second?
Okay, motion been made, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, next one is the fire department budget. Chief Grant? How you doing?
Very good.
Hi there.
Good.
Good evening.
Fire budget. Again, basically, this is a level dollar budget with FY13. and it's in the amount of $4,672,984, of which $4.4 million is personnel, $208,000 is general expense, and $20,000 is new equipment. If I'm reading it correctly. And that's actually slightly less because of one-time money you had in your FY13 budget. Yeah. Okay. I guess, Jack, I'm a little concerned as I look at, not so much looking at the FY13 compared to the 14, but looking at the actuals, some of the actuals for FY12 compared to what you're requesting in terms of general expense for FY14.
Okay.
And we all know with these level dollar budgets, we're starting to get to the point that it's going to be hard to make ends meet.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that we're not beyond that point with this budget. So, you know, like gasoline, FY12, your actual was $26,500. You're only budgeting $24,000 this year. You're about $38,000. You spent about $38,000 more in FY12 than you're budgeting for FY14 in general expenses.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, can we really do that?
To be perfectly honest, yeah, we probably can. And it will be a matter of sliding, you know, it'll be a matter of sliding money in and around. You know, if one's high, we haven't had a problem up to date, put it that way. We're certainly getting tighter. We have done some shifting around in this budget. The spots to steal from are getting smaller.
Yep.
But, you know, I do think we'll be okay this year here.
Okay. And I guess it would be, and I didn't really even look at your request to add additional money to your budget, but I think that really, that has resonated with the warrant committee in past years.
And I did not bring that with me, but I believe our total request to add back monetarily totals somewhere in the mid-40s, 43, 44, somewhere around there. And what we were looking to do with it is to increase the amount of money that is going into our overtime budget, increase a little bit what's going into the training line, and beyond that, we did have some equipment needs that we did want to put back in. So again, I don't have those breakdowns, but we certainly are looking to have a little bit of, and I believe in the last year or two, we have roughly gotten that much money back. So I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief Grant?
The $208,000 in the general expenses, what is that for?
You look at Schedule E.
Yep.
That Schedule E filled in?
Your
Maybe it didn't really.
Actually, yeah, you can look at it on mine. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So that's the 208,000. So it's 24,000 in gas. And this was the actual that was spent in 2012, 244,000. The biggest thing is light is medical and professional, and that one is hard to judge anyways, right? I mean, it's...
Yeah, and Patty and I actually sat and went through some things just the other day, and if you look at the actual for FY12, it's, you know, it's just under $60,000,
Right.
yeah. I will say, in the meantime, Cook and Company is working to offset bills, and that has considerably lowered it.
Okay.
That certainly made a difference. Even, we didn't enter into the agreement with them until well into last year, and it made a difference.
Right. And for those of people that aren't aware, that public safety basically is kind of self-insured for those kinds of,
Workers' comp issues.
Yeah,
Covered
yeah.
under 111F.
right. So we do have some stop-loss insurance for very major injuries, but, the knee injuries and that kind of stuff,
Those are
back
incurred by
injuries, we cover those out of our own pocket. And there's always a number of them every year.
There is, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we do have a motion before us.
Make a motion to approve, sign and forward to the warrant committee the FY14 fire department budget, the amount of $4,672,984.
Second motion.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
And we also have a second fire, and that's the education incentive for the fire department. And Jack, why don't you just explain
Yeah.
quickly how that works? And
Yeah, the educational incentive is contractual, that they can be working towards, I don't have the language in front of me, but working towards degrees in fire science. Yeah, I know Patty handed me the current, and I don't have it with me. But they get paid per credit, and I believe the jump that you're gonna see this year, there's 2 or 3 new firefighters that are in the program.
and that's something they get every year once they get
That
the-
is something they get, and it changes every year depending on credits that they've finished.
So it works
Maxing-
similar to the Quinn, except the Quinn is for any kind of
Similar to
education.
the Quinn,
This is specifically fire education.
this is specifically fire, and it does not, as it's currently written, thank you very much, as it's currently written, does not go beyond a bachelor's degree. And that bachelor's degree must be in fire science.
Okay.
Is this just like a stipend or something?
It is, yes.
Yeah. When do they get paid the stipend? After the credit is achieved, or?
Yes, there is a little concession because of when the paperwork comes in, that Patty will take what's being worked on in that semester there, assuming that they're going to pass that, because the paperwork is due before that semester is completed, but the payment comes out after the semester, so they have to earn those credits. So that's the only ones that aren't completely ironed out, is that final semester before the payment.
Is that factored into the fire budget, or is that separate?
That's into the budget.
It's included
That's
in the
into the
budget.
budget, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be, if you look at, if you look back at the preliminary salary sheets, there's a little bit of a variance
Yeah,
from
it's
the
in-
year before, and that's part of it. The other part would be that you have a couple of firefighters who have gone up steps, so there are a little bit of variations in this year to last year.
So this 95,000 is included in the 4 million?
Yes, it is,
Yes.
yeah.
Why does it have to be done separately? Why does it have to be voted separately?
It's subject, it's in their collective bargaining agreement that you, the Board of Selectmen, have to vote to approve the education of the firefighters.
I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2013. Is that 2013, or should it be, is that correct?
Should be 14.
Should be 14, right?
Fiscal year 2013, the
It
year
would be
we're in.
13,
Okay,
because
yeah.
those credits they
So
were.
we're actually
okay.
making the pay, yeah, we're
Yes.
approving making the
I make a
payment.
motion to
Done.
approve the fiscal year 2013 education incentive for the fire department in the amount of $95,438.50, which represents 1,978 college-earned credits.
Second motion.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Paula. Now, beyond that, the last, I was supposed to be here back in October 18th.
Oh, that's right.
And been bounced a couple of times, so I did bring along the tallies for the first quarter of what our runs are. And if you want them, I actually do have the second quarter up to today's date. So what I'll do is, next time I come, I'll bring the full second. I just figured we're so far into it at this point that I'd bring you the thumbnail of it. Nothing really out of the ordinary. Up until last week, we've been fairly quiet. We did have a bedroom fire Thanksgiving night last week, which, realistically wasn't a big event for us. It was one bedroom that was contained.
How many of your calls will go to Curry College and Fuller Village?
Percentage-wise, I'd have to break that out for you. To be perfectly honest, Curry College is far smaller than what it used to be. Since I was in my early years on the job, you go up there without exaggeration from Thursday to a Sunday night. You'd be up there at a minimum of 4 times a night, and you might be up there 10 or 12 times a night. Kenny Quigley has got a different atmosphere up there in the time he's been there, and we're up there far less. But that being said, I will say, with the combination of everything up there, and again, in my early days, Engine 4 was by far the quietest station that we had in town, and right now it's by far the busiest. So there is a lot of running going on, a combination of everything that's up there.
Would you say most of those are medical calls, or?
Yeah, a lot of it's medical. You might get some, food on the stove type calls up there.
Mm-hmm.
Falls.
When you say Engine 4, is that Atherton Street?
Engine 4 is Atherton Street, yes.
Yeah, looking at the statistics, 31, this first quarter, 31 fire calls, 500 rescue emergency medical service calls. That's far and away the largest.
Yeah, it really is amazing the change that you've had. And, Fuller Village probably is the largest change up there.
You actually go out to a motor vehicle lockout?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Put it this way, if you come up with a problem that you can't solve, we will get the call. Motor vehicle lockouts are actually fairly frequent.
15 in the second quarter?
Yeah, they happen.
Way back, and not that it's completely off the books, but, the whole cat in the tree thing.
I see one animal rescue.
What they've done, honestly, since, manpower's gotten a little tighter, and I talked 20 years back, they kind of made this change. We will still, in theory, do it, but what they did was they put a 3-day wait on it. If the cat's up in the tree, we mark the date, and if it's up in the
Still
tree
up there for 3 days later,
we will try to go get it.
Jack, I think in January you give out the burn permits. Is that what you call it?
Yes.
Do you get calls for those?
Not very often. People are pretty, I'm not saying you won't get any. For the most part, a lot of them are repeat customers, and they know very well what's required. Occasionally we'll get a call that the smoke is bothering someone, and, occasionally we'll get a call that someone is doing something they're not supposed to, in which case we generally will put it out on them. If they're permitted, we'll put it out and explain the rules to them, and give them another shot. And to my knowledge, we've never had to pull a permit from somebody, but we have put a fair amount of fires out on people.
What would be a good intent call?
Good intent would be somebody calls thinking someone, you haven't heard from somebody in a couple of days, go check on them. Anything to go and give some assistance, basically of a non-emergency. if you get a call for an odor of gas, and you get there and nothing is found, the intent was good. You know, you went, somebody thought they had a problem, things of that nature.
And one last question, when you show up at a medical emergency, does the ambulance show up as well, like Fallon ambulance, do they show up?
Yes.
All the
Yes,
time?
all the time. Occasionally, you'll get calls for a public assistance that somebody that you know very well through past transactions we've had with them, that you know they may have fallen, they're not hurt, help them back up and get them situated. Every now and then, something like that does turn into a call where they actually have hurt themselves, and we may call the ambulance behind that. But the vast majority, the ambulance is running with us.
I know Fallon, they pay for some training, right, for your...
Yes, yes, they do.
What kind of training and how many,
It kind of runs the gamut. They come in and do, I believe, Nancy Monroe is our coordinator that, from the department that coordinates with Fallon's. I believe they come in once a month, and they'll pick an emergency medical subject and just train on it. You may get childbirth, 1 month. You may get cardiac arrest 1 month. CPR. It's different every month.
If Fallon didn't do that, would you have to send your fire officers out to get that training? Or?
If Fallon's didn't come in and do it, yes, you can. I would say about a little more than half the department is certified as EMTs right now. They would have to go seek those credits to maintain their eligibility elsewhere. And they have to do that, some of it anyways, because the training that Fallon's does bring in isn't enough to get them there, but it's a big help.
Great.
The one last, or two last things that I would touch on really quick is that we are just kind of winding up our training on the new engine. It was a little further extended in that we were putting different hose and some different appliances on it than we've had. So that's winding up this week, and we hope to have that engine in service next week. And we are also working on filling the last opening that we have, and I will be sitting down with the Personnel Board December 11th, so that should bring our staffing up to full.
Great.
Which is how many?
56.
56 firefighters?
Yes.
Or 56?
Of rank, yeah. That encompasses all. Out of that, you have 4 deputy chiefs, 13 lieutenants, and the rest firefighters.
So is it 57 including you?
It would be 57 including me.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Jack? No. Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Okay, next up is the approval of the police department budget. Chief? how you doing?
your report card.
It is, I know.
Good evening.
Good evening. So we looked at this budget, was it last time,
Yes, we
right?
did.
And we've made the one change to add,
Yes, so the amended budget here basically changes the unfunded positions, reduces the unfunded positions for FY14.
from 4 to...
Reduces the unfunded to vacants by 2.
Right,
So
so
it-
there were
right.
previously 4
So
unfunded, now there's 2.
So our FY14 budget, level dollar budget, as submitted here, would call for staffing of 53 officers. Again, the difficulty will be, the argument will be before the warrant committee, as you see the line item for overtime is reduced to $264,000 in the request, where if you look just last year at FY12, I think the actual appropriation was 391, or 360, and the actual expenditure was like 491.
Right.
As you know, and I sent you each a briefing this week, a confidential briefing, just to kind of give you an idea of the issues that we deal with constantly. We don't go out and parade or advertise crime. We don't try to talk about all the issues that we deal with. But we are a community that is unique, and we are a community where policing is something that requires attentiveness on behalf of the police department each and every day, as well as the citizens who live here each and every day. As I think I wrote, I think if there were any think tank that exists, whether it's PERF, the Police Executive Research Foundation, DC, the IACP, the International Chiefs, major city chiefs, I think if any of them would come in and do a comprehensive study similar to what they did in 1992, you would see them at least recommend a staffing of 56 officers as a baseline, just to start with, just based on our workload, our calls for service. So I appreciate the fact that you allowed me to go back and do this. It will be an argument, but we're more than prepared, both statistically and operationally, to make that argument before the warrant committee. And hopefully with all of us, we will prevail.
And basically, we'll be looking for one-time money to pay the salaries while they're being trained, which I think is a reasonable request, certainly. So, certainly have our support on it. So we do have a motion before us.
I make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve, sign, and forward to the warrant committee the fiscal year 14 police department budget in the amount of $6,088,981.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Only to say that I agree with the sentiments that have been said about the need to adequately staff our police department. And that's a job that we're obligated to make sure that the people have the proper number of police officers to protect them. I am concerned about the lower number. We just finished talking to the fire chief, who said that there's 57 on the fire force. If one were to draw a parallel, you'd think that there should be 57 on the police force.
I would give that as standard
But-
logic.
But I'm not throwing that out at the moment, but I'm just drawing what was just said with the fire department.
I can accept that.
Yeah, I know you could.
Can I make one point, though, relative to it? Mr. Cohane asked Chief Grant about Fallon, and I just want to add a little about that. As you know, and I stated this last year when Fallon's contract was being renewed, I actually came here to the police department from Fallon many years ago. I was an EMT for several years, worked both at Fallon and Brewster EMS. And when Fallon took over the service from the police department, which ran it for over 30 years, I was the biggest person arguing against it. But two of the other things besides training that they provide for us is the biggest one, which is probably the biggest life-saving device that either Chief Grant or I carry in our apparatus, are the defibrillators, which run about $5,000 a piece. He owns them all. I have 10. I have no idea. I'm sure Chief Grant has at least 6. One goes down, he replaces. That's a capital expenditure of a vital life-saving tool that he covers. And the same for us as well. He covers all of our first aid supplies, all those things, kits, jump bags for the cars. There's a lot that he puts out that are in that contract that a lot of times people don't even realize. As well as the training, he does all of our in-service training. You just make a call, you set it up, and they come in and do it for you at no cost. So I know that and I'll be right up front, I consider Tim Fallon a very close friend, but I'm very impressed by what they do operationally. When we talk about the cost of the triangle of EMS, for our community, of public safety, being police, fire, and Fallon and EMS, we're getting one aspect of it at zero. And I just don't think, in Mr. Hurley, you're a numbers man, I just don't think numbers-wise we'll ever be able to beat that. It's really a benefit. We're getting big city EMS for our community. And as police chief, I couldn't sit here and in good faith say to you that we're not, because we really do. If you go to one incident, and I quote Sergeant Brown, when that firefighter Pickens was struck several years ago on 138, he's alive today because of the skill of those two medics that got him to BI. Absolutely, positively. And I don't think I've ever met a person who was present there or involved in it, who never told me otherwise. So that's really what Fallon brings to our community, and it's a big benefit. So I just wanted to ad lib on that a little bit while I was here.
I think it would be good, actually, if we, and you've told me that a few times, and I'm beginning to agree with you. It took me a while.
He's slow to move.
My,
I'm only kidding.
My thing was, you know, if you pull over a car and you got to tow it, it goes to a company that actually bid on it.
Right. If we're in the minority there, we're lucky. We don't advertise that.
You know, the Blue Hills Towing Company came
True,
in and they
you know.
bid on every tow in Milton.
Right.
My only question was, you know, Fallon seems to get this contract re-signed every few years without any bid. So I'd love to see what he actually does do for the town in writing, you know, and what it actually costs him
The biggest thing
versus what it would cost
us.
if he had to bid for the job, you know.
I don't think, I know one aspect of it, and I sit on a statewide committee for the Homeland Security, which encompasses so many different disciplines. And I know from the fire chiefs that I know that run EMS, one of the things, let's say we're a 1,500 runner-year community. Let's say one truck alone, because mutual aid is something we don't look for yet. He stacks those trucks because of the way operationally we're in a ring that goes Quincy, Weymouth, Braintree, Milton, Dedham. We ring the city, basically. And so he staffs those trucks in a way that they're constantly backing each other. So it would be unheard of, in fact, I can't even think of, like for Randolph Fire to come here, or Holbrook Fire to do a mutual aid would be, I couldn't even find it, and I went on a 10-year search a year ago, or 2 years ago for select. The big key I give you that is, hey, let's say we buy an ambulance tomorrow. We make the capital investment, we buy an ambulance, we train the firefighters. So what happens, one ambulance can't do 1,500 runs. So now you're gonna enter into someone else's mutual aid system outside of the one we're already in. So it's probably gonna have to be like Randolph. And the runs they do in your community is their money, not your money. Because they're gonna bill for that. So I know that, I see what you say there, but the benefit is, and you take the one injury, the injuries alone, if you were to track, and I did this a little bit a few months ago, I went back and tracked the police injuries, the 111 injuries, for like a 5-year period, related to the ambulance. It's unbelievable. Cook and Company go crazy. I mean, and I bet you if you brought in Cook and Company and talked to them about the communities that they have where they have EMS, you're gonna find a higher number of work-related injuries, particularly back injuries.
There
So
probably are. I mean, I still want to look at it.
Oh, I agree with, I'm not, I know when I sit here and as police chief, I'm trying to fight to get policemen, and I know that one of the things is, for you as a board and for us as a community, including the town meeting, you are fortunate that you only have to battle to find money to adequately staff public safety from a police and fire point of view. You don't have to buy an ambulance, you don't have to worry about, all of that is coming to you at zero, which clearly Fallon is in the business to make money, but I just don't think you could get it, and I just don't think you could do it. And I've looked at it a lot of different ways,
I'm okay with zero, to be honest.
I am too.
If we're getting the benefit, like if he is training firefighters and if he is replacing defibrillators and doing a lot more to make up the cost of what we could have got if he bid on it.
Yeah, it's something I think we should look at. I mean, I honestly don't know. I know what off-the-cuff statements from other selectmen have been in towns that have it, and said, it's a huge moneymaker. Is that a true statement? I don't know. We haven't studied it, but I know a selectman in Holbrook. We make $1 million a year on it. I mean, is it true? I honestly don't know, but
What does he say, that he makes money on the
because
ambulance?
you built the
You bill for
medical
it,
bill.
but he's not making $1 million in profit, doesn't, even when we ran it, we were at, the town of Milton was an 85% collection rate in 1991, which is, unbelievably high,
You're at a collection rate?
of 85%. That was very high for
That
because
means,
we did our own billing. We were getting 85, of the 100 patients that we were taking, we were getting paid for 85%. That's very high, but we were not break. He might make $1 million in his app, in his ambulance account, but now put in your personnel costs, all that. You've got to,
No, I know,
Right.
let's, like I said.
We're not paying, right, we're not
like I
paying
said,
any pension money.
It's
we're not
something that we
paying-
have to look at, and, yeah.
And I didn't mean to get into all, but I just, when you brought up the training part, to us, the biggest thing, just the defibrillators alone, that's, he comes in one swell, replaces all 10 defibrillators. That's a significant piece of change for us to come up with it.
I think that, you could look at it in terms of the numbers, but then also, I'm sort of looking at it the way you're suggesting. If there's a resident that needs help, Fallon will be there shortly and
We don't
quickly.
I don't think we have any
And-
complaints either, right?
And what's good about their response time is they will put another vehicle in place in case there's another problem. And they just seem to me to be very professional. And in terms of doing the emergency service that they do, my observations of them is that I wouldn't want another ambulance.
I wouldn't
If I
either.
need an ambulance, I want Fallon to come.
I agree with that, I
Yeah,
agree with
that's
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
So I didn't mean to open that big can, but I wanted to give them credit for credit due in that aspect, at least in how they support us operationally, is very important.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Good, thank you.
We're all set? You all set with them? You all set?
Mr. Chairman, you wanted to discuss the new marijuana legislation and the...
Oh, that's correct, yes. As long as
This will
we're
be
at
my
it.
only time before you on this.
As long as we're at it, yeah, and I know there was a news story this morning. I mean, nobody really knows much about the legislation right now. There's no regulations, they've been written yet, so.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I had a very productive discussion today with Ann Fidler on our Board of Health. Is the way this legislation is written, the statute is going to give DPH the ultimate teeth as far as setting the guidelines, regulations as to what it can be used for. There'll be 35 communities that will be allowed to have dispensaries in them.
First of all, it was never mentioned what we're talking about. We're talking
Oh,
about...
sorry, the medical marijuana law. that
Medical
just-
marijuana,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's on
That was what was on the agenda, so I apologize. So with regard to the medical marijuana law, it is brand new, Mr. Hurley, you're correct. According to the legislation, DPH only has 4 months to come up with guidelines. And from a law enforcement perspective, I have my own concerns, but we have to wait and see what happens. But I would really suggest to you that you invite her up to speak, because I would say that one of the things we don't want to be is we don't want to be one of the 35 dispensing communities. That's one of the things we don't want to be. So I think that this board will definitely want to weigh in and have some very productive discussions with the Board of Health. I can tell you, Michael Blanchard is already doing his due diligence. He's conferred with MMA. He's talked with other communities. He's talked with Anne Marie. He's getting his ducks in a row. There are a million questions,
I guess, yeah, the obvious question that comes in, if somebody, because it will only go to nonprofits, it's obviously a medical type of operation, so it fits within our zoning. So do we have any local control at all if a nonprofit medical facility comes to us and says, we want to establish a dispensary in Milton? Is it within the zoning? And I suspect it probably is.
It's a good question. I did say to her today when we spoke, I asked her right off front, I said, do you see your average doctor writing a prescription for this? But I suppose from a policing perspective, if we just look at what happened with oxycodone and Percocets, it just, so why would one not think that this could happen? If you look at the West Coast, in the communities where this has been enacted, the average age of those that are getting the scripts is 18 to 24. It's not the 59-year-old person with glaucoma or IM, it's the 18 to back pain, those things. And there's obviously going to be some abuse of the process. Just in Googling it and looking online a little bit just yesterday, there are already websites in the state you can go to that'll kind of walk you through if you're thinking of establishing, if you want to get financing, if you want to.
Big money.
You're correct. And we're talking about something that historically in this country has been illegal, someone's going to have to figure out how to deal with that. So, but I would say, after speaking with Ann today, It's not me, thank God. I think it'd be very productive of you going forward, and it's probably going to have to be sooner versus later, because it's only 4 months upon, it's a 4-month window. And I think you...
I guess the only thing we have similar to look at it is the, a few years back, the decriminalization of small amounts. And what has been the, I mean, we've had 3 or 4 years to look at that now. What has been the outcome of that?
It's a joke. It's literally a joke. And I've said this before, and I said this to her today. She said it to me first. You know, will there be anything that prohibits a 10-year-old boy who's, or someone, a 10-year-old who has some disease from being able to get it? Will there be, if you have the medical marijuana card, can you walk down the street and smoke in a public place? And I said to her, well, that's only a $100 fine as it is right now, even though we don't see a lot of that, but it's there. It's definitely, it's opened a playing field for you know, some of our arrests that you've seen we make now for distribution are significant. They just made a big one on Randolph Ave the other night. There's the risk versus the reward.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difficulty we have. Do I think 10 years from now we'll look at this differently? I think we will. I don't think there's any choice. I think, you know, who wants to have their 10-year-old kid smoking marijuana? They're not going to want that. But as it starts to creep into our society and into our culture, I think it's going to. There's already statistics out there that show just the use of marijuana by teenagers has long-term negative effects just to the cognitive thinking ability. So I think when you get not the criminologists, but the people in the medical field looking at this saying, what did we do? It could change. But for right now, the window is short, and I think this is they appear very much on top of this to me, and I think it would be very productive of you to have a discussion with them. And I think she wanted to actually come to. She just had a prior engagement, couldn't come. But
that is a good idea. We probably should and think about the zoning implications too. I mean, I'm not sure about how many. You said what, 35 dispensaries?
35. It looks like 35 dispensaries in the Commonwealth, throughout the Commonwealth. Yeah.
But how that's going to be regulated?
I can name a couple of communities where I bet that I think they're going to be, but I don't.
Because I know there are some communities like Boston is scurrying to change zoning so that it can't be near schools, can't be near.
Quincy's doing the same thing. Quincy's doing the same thing. So I do think it's that by them being proactive and you being proactive, it's probably just in the long term look at it. It's probably the smarter thing to do.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. Have a good night.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on with budgets. We have the Conservation Commission, a $2,500 budget. It's basically all general expenses. It is all general expenses. And
I'll make a motion. Approve, sign, and forward to the warrant committee the FY14 Conservation Commission budget in the amount of $2,500.
Second.
motion been made second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Now, the next one we have doesn't have an amount on it.
Mr. Chairman, that budget's not on for this evening. It will be
Okay.
deferred till the December
Okay.
6th meeting.
Okay, so the next budget we have before us is the Historic Commission, $2,240 budget, and again, that's all general expenses.
Motion to approve, sign, and forward to the warrant committee the Historical Commission budget in the amount of $2,240.
Second the motion.
Motion been made second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
The next one is the Inspectional Services budget of $348,338, and that is $332,938 of personnel and $15,400 of general expenses. And that's another one of those budgets that their actual general expenses in FY12 was $24,000. So almost a $10,000 shortfall in terms of what they're requesting. Which it seemed to me that they're not going to make it. And most of the general expenses are, actually most of the general expenses are miscellaneous. I don't know what the miscellaneous is. Postage, office supplies, meeting expenses.
This is one department that I would actually like to see increased. The I'd like to see our building commissioner, in the office more, approving plans and getting permits out the door and actually hiring a part-time inspector to, because it is a huge revenue-generating department that I think is not being utilized to its full capacity. So I have no problem approving this budget. In fact, I'd love to approve some more.
The building commissioner will be into your December 6th meeting with a actual request to increase his budget and add a new part-time inspector. But as you know, by your bylaw, you have to have your departmental budgets into the warrant committee by December 1st.
Yeah.
So we had to get this level dollar budget in, but because of other commitments that he's been dealing with on other issues, he didn't have a chance to get his paperwork put together to request that additional position. So he will be coming to you on December 6th to do that, and then go to the personnel board hopefully on December 11th to also ask for that third position, which is a part-time building inspector.
It's good news.
We do have a motion in front
I'll
of us.
make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve, sign, and forward to the warrant committee the inspectional services budget in the amount of $348,388.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, now we have the Selectmen's E&R budget of $21,852. This one's sideways. And basically, it's $14,552 of personnel and $7,300 of general expense.
And as you know, Mr. Chairman, the Selectmen's E&R budget is not a level dollar budget. It is one that is an actual budget because of the elections that we have year-to-year change.
Right. So 13 was a big one because we had the three.
Primary and the presidential.
And 14 is going to be a lot smaller. There's only one. Only one?
Is the fall town meeting and the annual town election and annual town
Right.
meeting.
So that's it.
At this point.
Yep. Unless we have a special election.
Make a motion to approve, sign, and forward to the warrant committee the selectmen's E&R budget in the amount of $21,852.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, now we have,
You have the consolidated facilities?
Well, I was going to ask about that. We've got information on it, but
Yes, but you don't have a
it's
motion.
not
You don't have a
listed.
motion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the motion.
$612,412.
and basically, again, this is level dollar with, level dollar with FY13. It's actually $2,700. There was some one-time money in the 13 budget that is not in the 14 budget. His personnel line item is actually down from FY13, and the reason for that is there were some positions that were being advertised for in 13 that hadn't been currently filled. When they were filled, they came in actually at I think, less dollars.
A lower rate, yes.
Yeah.
When we advertise, we have to advertise at the top step because we don't know if current employees are going to transfer into the department.
Right.
That being said, no one did transfer in. We got employees from outside, so they all started at step one, which reduced the appropriation.
So how much of this amount is personnel?
$483,639.
And the rest is from materials? And
Yeah, $114,773 general expenses. And those general expenses, the lion's share of the general expenses are maintenance contracts and cleaning contracts. And let's see, we have a little bit left over from follow-up on the needs study that was done in, well, it was appropriated in FY12. And that's some tools and operating supplies and
Right.
that kind of thing.
And, well, I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Does the schools contribute anything to the, is this Is this the
The,
town's portion, or, and does the schools?
well, the schools, in the sense that the janitors are under the control of the Consolidated Facilities Department, but they're still under the payroll of the schools. And that's at least for 13 and 14.
The janitors?
Yes.
The custodians,
Custodians?
yes.
And I mean, it's hard to say what's going to happen with that because it's contractual at this point.
Right.
You know, so, but they are under the control of the Consolidated Facilities Department. So so they're being overseen by and we did get the concession they can move from school to school,
Yes.
but they can't move outside the schools at this point.
But are they going to eventually be in the consolidated facilities?
Depends on the collective bargaining process.
That is the hope.
Yes.
I think that was
Going forward, that is
negotiated,
the
right?
hope.
That was the hope, yeah.
So this budget could, in essence, double next year.
It could, if that were to, and presumably you would expect that the school budget would come down proportionately.
Fortunately.
Okay, so with that, gotta make
got-
your own motion up, but it should be easy enough to
You're
do.
the
Got
only
the
one with the
motion
motion.
here.
He's got the motion.
Go ahead.
Thanks to Mrs. Rizzi. I'll make a motion to approve, sign, and forward to the warrant committee the Consolidated Facilities Fiscal Year 14 budget in the amount of $612,412.
Second motion.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Only to say that I like the fact that we've got a pretty good amount of money in there for maintenance, and it's important that we keep our buildings clean, and that's one of the goals of this new Consolidated Facilities Department.
I think all the feedback has been tremendously positive from the departments that are involved. Not all the departments opted in. For example, Parks, Cemetery did not. Library is ecstatic with the service they've been getting. You look around Town Hall and see
Yes.
the vast improvement, over what it was before we had a Consolidated Facilities Department. The biggest problem we've had, because I'm on the subcommittee that is kind of, overseeing the transition of the facilities department. And the biggest problem was because of the way we budget and because budgets have been level dollar for so many years now, there is maintenance that occurs in those budgets, but to try and ferret out where it is and what it is and how much it is almost impossible because they don't budget for it. They say, well, if we need it, we find it someplace, So to say that we can give you $5,000 from our budget for maintenance supplies, well, we don't have it. It's not in our budget. We just find it when we need it. So that's the problem that, because initially we were going to try and do that, just have it all under Consolidated Facilities, that they would purchase all the maintenance supplies and all that
All
other
the
stuff.
maintenance contracts as well under this.
Right. Maintenance contracts, we are getting there.
We're getting there, yes.
Elevator contracts, and we'll be under Consolidated Facilities. The cleaning contract is now.
Fire extinguisher maintenance.
Yeah, those kinds of things, the bigger contracts. And there's some economies of scale in that, too, because they can bid them all.
That's right. Yes.
So, okay. Let's see, we have some appointments. We have, actually, there's two committees we're going to appoint. One we're going to defer on, and that's the wind energy, only because of what's going on with the wind turbine project and everything. But otherwise, we have a couple of committees.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to reappoint the following members to the Alternate Energy Committee to serve through December 2013. Henry McLean, Oliver Critchlow, Tara Manor-Richa, John Barron Clancy, John King, and Laurie Webster.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes, we've actually had a resignation. Mr. King, at the last moment, has resigned.
Okay.
So we have a vacancy
Okay.
there. We've also have a recommendation from the chair of that committee for somebody who was on our database who would like to serve. So we do have an option to appoint that person unless you want to wait until the next go-around.
If we only have the one, then yeah, why not just do it?
What's the person's name?
The person's name is Philippe Genereux.
Could you spell that?
Yep, PhilippeGenereux. He's an architect and co-chair of the Committee on the Environment at the Boston Society of Architecture. And he comes highly recommended by Mr. McLean, who chairs the committee.
Sounds like a perfect
I'd like
candidate.
to
So a friendly amendment to add.
amend my motion to delete the name of John King and add Philippe General.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded, so any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, now we're going to skip over wind energy and go to the Town Government Study Committee.
Ewan has also resigned from that.
Mr. Chairman, on these reappointments, UNNS has also requested not to be reappointed to this committee. So
Okay.
you will be appointing everybody but UNNS.
Okay, we don't have a replacement
Due
of this
to
one.
his, we do not.
That was the committee that I believe that the
Town-
selectmen appointed 7.
Town
and
government.
the town moderator appointed 2, but then we added Mr. Gordon to it.
That's true. So we'll be
So-
down to what we,
Originally started out with.
yeah, okay.
So it's the names listed except Ewan?
Yes.
That's right.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to reappoint the following members of the Town Government Study Committee to serve through December 2013. Richard Neely, Kathleen Conlon, John A. Cronin, Anne Marie Fagan, Robert Gatkin, Leroy Walker, Michael Joyce, Mary McNamara, and Marvin Good.
Second motion.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, signage request for First Congregational Church. This is to approve a request for First Congregational Church to display a banner on church property to announce the church's 6th annual caroling on the Common program that is scheduled for Saturday, December 8th, 2012.
Second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Girl Scout cookies. Who wants it?
I'll tell you. Oh, you got the cookies? Oh, I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve a request from the Girl Scouts of Milton to hold sidewalk sales in East Milton business areas in accordance with the town's rules for fundraising events on public sidewalks.
Provided the selectmen get some samples. Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor? Unanimous. Okay, the MIA annual business meeting and luncheon, and this is a motion to authorize the chair to represent the board voting in delegates of MIA business meeting.
Mr. Chairman, this is in conjunction with the MMA
Yes.
annual conference in January at the Heinz. On that Saturday, the town's insurance company, Maya, has a luncheon, and all 3 members are invited to that luncheon. However, you do need to vote your chair as the voting delegate for that luncheon.
I'll make a motion, did you already give a motion?
No, you can,
Okay.
you can do the motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize Chairman Hurley to represent the board as its voting delegate at the MIA annual business meeting and luncheon on Saturday, January 6, 2013, at the Heinz Convention Center.
Second motion.
Made and seconded.
Are
Any
you going to
further?
vote for it, Mr. Hurley?
Sure, why not? Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Discussion of town administrator's job description, and we've got Mary McNamara and Leroy Walker to join in the conversation. Nope, I guess we just have,
Roy was here earlier, and when he saw we were on the agenda, he went back to a meeting of the Finance Committee for the, Finance Committee for the School Committee.
okay.
But I did send him a text, and I think he's on his way as we speak.
There he is.
Right there.
Oh, look at that.
You're quicker than you thought, huh?
Mr. Walker.
So I guess what we've attempted to do in this job description is kind of take the kind of generic job description we had and combine it with the job description from the Government Study Committee. I guess that's the appropriate, that was the official job description of the Government Study Committee, or was it Lori Walker? Or a combination of both? But we've kind of combined them together, and where we thought that there was language in there that might require a town meeting vote or home rule petition, we kind of wordsmithed it to be, supervises or
Assist
with, or that kind of thing. So, do you have any comments on it?
I'll let you start if you have any. If not, I have a couple.
Well-
And then I have I want to say this so I don't forget to bring it up, but there was an issue with the charge for the Town Administrator Screening Committee that we wanted to bring up with the board tonight also, but we can do that after we talk about
Okay,
that.
sure.
Yes.
Well, I think you are to be commended. I'm excited because I think that what our objective was to try to provide you with a scope of responsibility that was somewhat expanded, that would allow you to delegate where you thought that was appropriate, and where you could have a role that's performed in a way that frees you up to do more strategic thinking, long-term financial planning, whatever you guys think are the important things to work on. So I think you've accomplished that. And if down the road you think that a home rule petition or any of those other adjustments are necessary, that's fine. But I think you've defined a role in a way that should be attractive, and that I think sends the message that there's a substantive role here. So I think you did a good job.
That being said.
That being said. And I'm probably going to come off as being less positive, but my comparison of the job description as the Town Government Study Committee proposed it versus the final draft rendered tonight that's being voted on did not address some of the powers that we were looking for to begin to bring to the job description for town administrator. I totally understand that that's because some of them, for instance, a power of appointment or even administrating things like personnel policies, practices, rules and regulations, comp plans, collective bargaining agreements. Language of that type was not included in the draft that's before you tonight. And I guess my only comment would be after Mr. Walker's statement is simply that we would continue to encourage the board to continue to deliberate on this issue of whether or not we want to give some serious or consequential responsibility to the town administrator, even though it may require things such as a home rule petition down the road.
And again, we can do that without a home rule petition, but it's only as good as this one board wants to delegate it.
Right, and that should be part of the discussion, whether
Right.
it's time for the town to make a move in that direction.
And perhaps that may be the way to start it, is just to have the board, if we think it proper, to delegate that responsibility and see how it works. And that's probably a better argument back to town meeting that, yeah, it works fine. Let's formalize it.
It's a good point.
There's a motion before us, yes.
To approve and forward to the Personnel Board?
To approve final draft of the town administrator's job description, which includes input from the Town Government Study Committee. That is the motion.
Second motion.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Only to say that I read this I did circle under recommended minimum qualifications, I did circle the number 10 under years of government administration, management experience in a city or town. And I circled the 10 because it struck me as being kind of a big number. I don't think we should be restricting ourselves to the inbox where you've got to pick somebody that's maybe worked in some other town that's for a long time. That private experience aspect,
But don't we
we've got
couch
it
it that
mentioned, but that could be attractive. I circled the number 10 because, I don't want to restrict us to a certain box of candidates.
That's not in the job description, is it?
Yes, it is.
I thought it was.
Yes, it's in,
Oh.
hold on.
Oh, yeah, okay. Minimum
But it's
qualifications.
cut.
I just,
If you,
I'm just sharing, I mean, I can go along with it, but I'm just sharing that number 10 caused me to see it and circle it.
Yeah. I mean, it's government and/or private sector.
it's couched with your private sector experience will also be considered. So that can also.
And I
be
think I mentioned to you previously that, we've got our description, but we can have some flexibility.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, and I think that the.
I don't want to be, like
Committee is in
a
total
candidate
agreement
that we
with
all
that.
love, we can't discard that person because they've only worked in government for 6 years or something.
Exactly.
That'd be
No.
not a big restriction.
No. One of the things that the 10-year limit reflects more is just an overall work experience level. And I think, we certainly want someone with some employment history and maturity to bring to this job.
I just want to say that, to the Town Government Study Committee, I think you did a fabulous job. In particular, Mr. Walker, whom I've had the pleasure of serving with on the school committee. You're a strategic thinker, as you said yourself, and I actually had a lot of fun and made me a better critical thinker when I was reading what you proposed. I think it will work in the future, most definitely, and I want to applaud you guys for putting it together.
Thank you.
Fantastic job.
I understand you have gotten resumes in.
Right. We can
About
kind of.
14 or so resumes you.
That's correct. The Town Administrative Screening Committee has met twice now, including this past Monday. This past Monday, we met in executive session. We had 14 resumes that we were able to review. Tomorrow is our current deadline. And the main reason why I'm here is to ask the board if they would be willing to make a revision to our charge, which would allow the chair of the Town Administrative Screening Committee to extend the deadline if the committee was of the opinion that it would be beneficial to do that. Now, this would just be the deadline for applications. This would not be the deadline to present candidates to the board. But this would mean that we could make that extension without having to come back here to the board to request permission to do that, to extend the deadline on the applications. We're not positive yet. I haven't, I should have called you and spoken to you today, Anne Marie, to find out if you did have any. I mean, we're expecting a huge rush tomorrow, which is but we are planning, we have a meeting scheduled for next Monday, so that'll be our third meeting. We'll see what we have for resumes at that time. Our deadline will be passed then, and we'll discuss whether or not it would be prudent and wise to extend it, say 3 weeks, 4 weeks, tops.
I mean, I have no problem with that, certainly.
If we were going to extend it, obviously it would be advertised again, right?
Oh, right, we'd have that same conversation.
I noticed in the magazine we get,
The Beacon.
The Beacon, I saw the advertisement, but I noticed it didn't have a salary in there.
Right.
It said experience, commensurate with, salary commensurate with experience.
Right.
I noticed in other towns, when they were looking for town administrators, they did put in the amount of salary they were offering.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it would be a good idea if you mentioned it, or do we know what we're offering?
Interestingly enough, we actually had that discussion at the meeting Monday night.
Oh, you did?
Yes. And I think that certainly if the board is of the opinion that it would be a good idea to put a salary out there, then certainly, we could include that in any posting for the job. Some on the committee felt it would be very beneficial to have it, and others felt that we were not in a position to include that information. Certainly, the Board of Selectmen have that authority. Would you agree that was the tenor of the...
Well, I would, but here's the HR director perspective. That cuts both ways. So ideally, you want to attract the best candidate and then talk about salary. You don't want people to screen themselves out based on salary. And there are some, we could put a salary range, but there are some candidates that you might be willing to negotiate a salary with, and there are others where you would say, well, we're not going to pay that. Yeah, that was in the ad, but right now you're making $50,000 less than that, so we're not going to give you a $50,000 increase. So ideally, you'd want that discussion to occur at the time you're talking with the candidate that you'd like to hire, rather than at the time you're having people apply. And frankly, I don't think the lack of a salary in the ad is, we didn't get the number of resumes that I thought we would. As a matter of fact, I had offered to bet you how many resumes we would get. I'm glad you didn't take that bet, because I was way off. But
I think we did make that bet.
No, I don't think we did.
Number of candidates.
But I'd like to see a broader pool, but I think it is more the challenge of, well, there are two challenges. One is getting the information in front of the right people, and the second is that I think probably the individual that you guys are going to be most excited about is probably working. So it's going to be someone that we might have to pull from somewhere else, not someone who's not working right now. So
That's a good point. And anybody who wants this job anyway, whether you announce it or not, knows exactly what the town administrator was making.
Right.
Exactly.
That's public record.
Oh, it's public
Yeah.
information?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Is
And a
it?
budget.
It's probably the first thing they'd find out when they don't see it advertised.
So,
That doesn't mean that will be the salary that the board offers to them,
Precisely.
but it's certainly available to them to know that.
And I guess the other problem you'd have too with publishing the salary is we already submitted a budget to the warrant committee, and that has a number in it. I would feel uncomfortable about publishing a number that's higher than that number, even though you might, when push comes to shove, negotiate a number that's higher than
Exactly.
that. I would feel uncomfortable publishing it, I think.
Yep.
Okay, so, I guess we need a motion to extend the,
Allow the chair
To authorize the chair
Chair
to
to
extend the application deadline if necessary.
yeah, and I'm just wondering, you mentioned 3 to 4 weeks. I'm wondering if part of the motion should have a time frame.
yes, yeah,
So,
You
and-
could say 3 to 4 weeks,
Yeah,
exactly,
or not more
beyond
than
the
4.
current deadline,
not more than
Okay.
4 weeks beyond the current.
If necessary.
Only if necessary.
When would you determine if it's necessary?
Probably either Monday or shortly thereafter.
And you would determine by
Well,
the applicant
the
pool?
applicant pool that has come to us up till now, right? Plus, we all were given kind of assignments at the last meeting to try and go out and do some networking also. So just for them to feel that, I think we will have, come Monday, there may be a better feel for whether there is a need to extend the deadline.
And if I might, the other calendar problem we have is that we're authorizing, if you decide to vote this, we're authorizing an additional 4 weeks at the worst 4 weeks of the year for
Yes.
recruitment.
Right, Christmas holiday. yeah.
Timing is not great.
Ask the chair to extend the deadline for applications for the town administrator's job by 4 weeks.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to authorize the chair to extend the deadline
For
resumes.
applications.
for applications for the town administrator's job for an extra 4 weeks.
Beyond the,
Beyond the current deadline.
Beyond the current deadline of
November 30.
30, yeah.
November 30th.
Second motion?
okay, motion been made, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's my email address.
Perfect,
Is he accepting new patients?
for sure, and I suggested that.
But when I see you,
Okay, we still are in session, so. All right, I'm going to propose a motion to enter into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to threatened litigation, Kevin Murn versus Town of Milton, and for the purpose of discussing non-union collective bargaining, police chief contract, and to consider the lease of the Animal Rescue League property, believing that having these discussions in open session would have a detrimental effect on the litigation, bargaining, and negotiating position of the body, and return to open session for the purpose of adjournment and to convene a meeting of the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Fund.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Mr. Sweeney?
yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley, yes.